we have met, we have gone over issues that we've all encountered in the last 5 years or so. We've tried to help Band-Aid and put those together as best we could. We had disagreements sometimes, and we came together and went with the choices that were the most accepted by everybody. Believe me, if we could go to Congress, this group would help take care of the mess we're in right now. Okay, we are going to do the sales contract first. We're going to do it section by section. I'm going to read it. Warren's going to talk about it. And then when he's through, we'll open any questions for anybody in the group. Please ask questions. All questions are good. The question you ask will probably help somebody sitting next to you that is nervous about asking it. So please do that. We're going to have a break after the sales contract for about 10 or 15 minutes. Then we'll come back and do lots and land. It will not take long. Counter offer forms, it will not take long. And thank you again to Warren, bless his heart, for doing this. We oldies understand that he's been doing this for years, closing things, doing title work. The newer ones here may not understand he has taught at Murray State for how many years now?
100 years.
Now, Gail, we're the same age.
But it's
at least 15, yeah.
At least 15. Mm-hmm. So he is well knowledged in this and probably taught people that are now in the field.
I've seen some students out here, and most of them are here. There's one, there's two, there's 2, 3 others, so that's good. It's always good to have students. No. But we're always glad to have you. It's always good to have a refresher course here, and we'll try to answer questions. A lot of times, many of you will call my office and ask questions. I love that. I'd rather you ask the question before you sign the contract than after you sign the contract, and now we have to worry about fixing it. Many times you don't have the cooperation of all the parties because they start getting a little cross with each other when you start making changes. So this is a good refresher course. Good things to think of. Preventative maintenance is what I like to think of it as. So we'll get started.
Amen. I will say this, of course, is not the perfect form. There is no such animal. Every deal we do is different. There's no way to put everything in here that is needed, but we think you're going to like it. Let's get going. We're going to start sales contract, and I call that top section the informational part. There is nothing really new there. It should look exactly the same. You will see that we do talk about full names. Now, we understand when you write the offer as a buyer, you may not have the seller's full name there. You will have it when they respond at the end. So unless you want to call the agent and ask for full names, you'll just have to put their last name or how it appears in the MLS, the printout. I would like Warren to talk to us about why we need the deed book and page number and its importance.
Basically, the deed book and page number is my reference if I'm an attorney doing a title search. It is your reference to get that information and look at it so that you know what property you are selling. Now, this is critical because it doesn't always fit the line. Many times you have a piece of property and there may be 2 deeds and 2 page numbers, 3 deeds, 3 page numbers. You may have 3 lots on 1 deed. We need to know which lots that you're selling. Many times we get a deed in, deed book and page number, and then our first response as an attorney is to take the deed and go to the property valuation office. Why we do that? To look at the card, because it's important to see what else is out there. Sometimes we have a closing and we don't know that there's a trailer on the property, and it won't be on the deed because it's not required to be listed on the deed, especially if it's a piece of personal property which has never been converted to land. Okay, so we look at that and we start comparing notes, and then we know if there's something else we have to deal with, like a trailer, or in many cases we have adjoining lots, because at the PVA office they will clip those file folders together if they're adjoining lots and owned by the same people. Now that tips us off like, hey, there's an adjoining lot here. What is it that's going? What are you selling? Is there a septic tank on the other lot now? Is there some reason why that we're leaving one lot out? And that's when you get a call from us saying, okay, is this all? Because there's been 2 or 3 times in our past 3 or 4 years that we've done a complete title search. We get to closing and say, well, what about that lot behind us? Well, I only saw deed book and page number. Now, I will tell you, most lawyers will just follow that strictly. And if we have no indication something else is being transferred, that's all we're going to search. And if that's it and we get to closing and we have another piece of property, it's a very uncomfortable situation. I'm not certifying title if I haven't searched all the property. And so just keep that in mind. If there's a lot behind, if there's a lot on the side, or if there's something else that's attached to it, if there's an easement, we need to know that. And so if you need more space than what's provided there, keep writing down DB, put that deed book, page number, and list is all those that are applicable. It will definitely shorten the conversation and give your lawyer that's doing the title search an opportunity to know how many searches he's going to have to do, or she. Does that make sense? Okay, let's go back to the full name. This is important because Kentucky has decided that we haven't been doing it right 2 years ago. Remember, they passed a statute that says we have to use the full legal name, and we went a whole full year without knowing what that meant. Typically now, they will accept what's on the driver's license. And so if you can get a copy of the driver's license of the seller, if you represent the sellers, also the buyer, we need to know all that, okay? And that's going to be a good thing to have because I'm going to need it at closing anyway. We're required to get those when we have a closing. And then we will utilize those names that's on the driver's license. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, if I get the full legal name, we'll do an also known as, because the purpose behind that statute is that some people don't use their names. They use their nickname. And many of us know people that have nicknames that they use. You know, a good example, and maybe Butch will forgive me on this, Butch Sargent. Most of you know him, surveyor, used to be here, I mean, he does surveys. That's not his name. Do you know what his real name is? F.T. Sargent. F.T. Sargent. And I still don't know what F and T means. I've tried to bribe somebody to get that information. I can't get it. But anyway, that's the purpose, is so that when you're searching, you have a reason to know who all these folks are. And it sort of protects you and me both during that time frame. When we do title searches, we can pretty much tell if someone is having credit issues because they have 3 names, you know, first name, middle name, last name. As soon as they start having credit problems, they only use their middle name. Why is that? Everybody knows someone's going to be looking for them to put liens on property. That's another reason we need to know their full legal names. Okay? Back to the deed book and page number. There's another one reason that we need to know that, and you need to know who the sellers are. So, your deeds have the grantors and grantees, and so the grantees will be typically the seller that you are representing. You may have 2 names on there. You may have 3 names on there. It may say husband and wife. If it doesn't, I'm going to give you a call. We're going to look for it because we need to know if they're husband or wife or if they're partners, which now Kentucky recognizes unions of same-sex marriages. So we have to treat those people as spouses, okay? And so we need to know that information. And we need the names of all parties, especially the spouses, because they have to compromise their interest. And if you don't get their signature on this contract, they can refuse to sign a transfer. They don't have to be at closing. They don't have to be there. And then we try to have a closing and the spouse comes in and says, I didn't agree to sign this and I didn't agree to this property value. Things to think about. Causes some little problems when we get to closing. I've had 2 of those this past year where we got to closing. Are you married? Well, sort of. How many of you have heard that one? What does that mean? That's like being almost pregnant, right? And I said, are you going through a divorce? Well, we're separated. What's that mean? Have you filed for divorce? No. Then you're married. Cut and dry. Where's your spouse live? I don't know. We have to find the spouse. And we did have that issue already this past 12 months. So these are the beginnings of this contract, and probably the most important of these beginnings, because everything else is probably not going to take us long to talk about. All right, any questions?
I will say, you will need Warren in the case he gave about the adjacent lot. Many times we go to closings and we're so excited to be there and the parties are all talking that we do not read the legal description. What happens when they go home and find out they didn't get the lot
Right.
that was adjacent?
They're not happy.
Then they use Warren to sue us probably.
No, I won't do that.
Yeah.
I won't do that, but
That's fine.
they start lawyering up, and then everybody gets real concerned. And, I mean, rightfully so, because they now feel like they have been misrepresented, so to speak, or wasn't accurately represented. And now I'm talking to the lawyers saying, calm down, this will all work. And usually if it does, you can get them calmed down. But you got to get past that understanding that they're going to get what they're contracting for.
And I've got a question on property address. When we sell land that has a house, has a barn, has outbuildings, maybe it's got 32 acres, is this the place, Warren, that we should not only put the address, but put 32 acres?
I think that'd be an excellent idea, especially if you're carving out the acreage from a larger tract. Mm-hmm. We need to know what's going to be estimated to be remaining, or that's going to be transferred.
Right.
Because then you're going to go back to another page here which talks about surveys. And we're going to require a survey if you're going to carve out a piece of property. That's just good business for you and me both. Now, technically, if it's over 5 acres, there's some argument that you don't have to have a survey. Talk about that if you're in a lawsuit. Which is cheaper, paying me as a lawyer or getting a survey?
And I think too, if they do have the survey and it comes up 16 acres and you thought you were getting 32, if you have the 32 written there, now you've got a way to go. Our price was based on the 32.
Right.
Now we go back and renegotiate the price if they continue to want it.
That's correct. That's correct. Yes.
I want to mention what Loretta has had us do. If there's acreage, if it doesn't have a survey, we always put approximate. But if we have it, we'll say if the property is in excess of 32 acres, or if it's in less than 32, the price will be adjusted at X number of dollars per acre.
Right, and that's okay to negotiate that.
And it's going to make a difference. It could be
Definitely.
when it's surveyed.
Right.
Correct.
And that's a good thing. Let me ask too, Warren, underneath the deed booking page, that this is where we write in numbers the amount that you are offering, and we also spell it out. Why do we do that? Is that just for clarity?
It's for clarity.
Okay.
Primarily, the number is going to be easier to read, but that falls back to legal interpretation of negotiable instruments. How many of y'all have written checks before? Everybody. You realize you can write a number in, but when you sign it and you sign a different number, which one does the bank take? The written one, and that's why we do that. Because that also tells me, okay, which one is it? Let's call and verify.
Correct.
That's why we do that.
Are there any questions of Warren on this first section at all? Now's the time to ask. No, we're good. All right, we're going to go to section 1 now, purchase price. We go back to our math in grade school. A plus B plus C has to equal D. This is the same format that we had before. There's nothing new here. I will ask of Warren, because I have seen over the years, occasionally an agent will write in on the additional cash at closing and the amount of financing TBD to be determined. And I wanted Warren to explain why that probably is not the greatest idea.
Well, you sort of leave it, if it's contingent upon financing, that's where it becomes more of an issue. And Ashley might be able to speak to this a little better. But when you have earnest money, we know what that is. That's to bind the purchase contract. You have to have money in this contract to bind it, to make it legally enforceable in a court of law. Now, I say that because that is the easiest way to make it a binding contract. There are other ways to make it binding, because if you sign it and there's reliance both on both parties and detrimental reliance, and that's a legal term, then that could also be interpreted as a legally binding contract if both parties have done something already to enforce the agreement. It's easier to say, put some money down so we don't have to have that argument. Additional cash is good because that makes a difference on financing. Ashley can probably address that for you, but sometimes people cannot qualify for the amount of financing that they want. And then the lender says you have to bring more money to closing. And with that, that's what the additional cash section is for. So, TBD doesn't tell us that. You know, it doesn't give us anything to say that the agreement is going to be terminated or breached. And if you suspect that there's not going to be the qualification on an amount that's going to work and there's going to be additional cash, the lender's also going to want to know if it's a gift or not. Who's it coming from? When is it coming? What's it for? Because all these underwriting rules now have changed a lot in the last 3 years. And sometimes it is not acceptable to receive a gift. And then they don't qualify. So we need to know that up front, the likelihood. So if you're going to plan on that, if someone's going to be making a $10,000, $15,000, or $20,000 gift for the purchase of this needs to be on the contract so the lender knows that's going to be something to be concerned about. Right. That's why it's there. Okay? If you put to be determined, nobody knows. And then you go in and then the rules change and, oh, lo and behold, they have to get $15,000 from somebody. Well, the lender may not approve that. Okay? So that's why it's important to know if you know it up front. If you don't know it up front, I would not put TBD on there because that shows anticipation. Put 0 on there, and then if it's going to change, do an amendment or an addendum to the contract. And then give that back to the bank so they understand what's going on.
Good advice. Any questions on purchase price? Okay, let's move on. Number 2 is financing. We have beefed this section up, which I think will help us all. The very first one is all cash. This is a cash sale, no financing is involved. Buyer represents that the cash is available and agrees that the contract is not contingent upon the receipt of said cash from any source. Proof of verifiable funds is requested within 5 calendar days from contract acceptance. We had, our committee had, instead of the word requested, put will. And when I took it to Warren, he looked at me and said, that's not a good word. We need to put requested, and you can explain why there.
Right. The reason you put will in, I mean, if you put the requested in there, you can't force someone to tell you what their finances are. You are now creating a scenario that if they do not do that, they will breach the contract and lose their earnest money. Okay? Now, proof of verifiable funds is a good faith effort. What you can do is tell them at closing that the closing attorney must have certified funds, and then that requires them to bring it. But when you're electing to check that one off, you don't want to screw up a closing because someone doesn't want to tell you their finances. You know, they may not want to go to the lender and tell the bank that they're going to be taking a big chunk of money out, or they're going to go to their investment person and they have to cash some stuff in. That's usually what happens. And then they're not wanting to, or they can't get from that investment house a letter saying they've got the funds because they technically don't until it cashes out. And then it has to be put into a bank account or a separate account where the funds have to be verified. See, so you might could ask for letters, but to require that, I think you're setting yourself up for a possible default situation before it even starts.
And I think you told me too, which was true. He looked at me
Yeah.
and said, well, you have the word will here. He said, what happens when they don't? What are you going to do to them?
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, well, we didn't cover that.
Yeah, what happens?
So
Yeah.
that's another reason we shouldn't do that because of that very question. Okay, and the second part of that, we have added buyer will or will not have an appraisal. This is mainly for you because it's under all cash. Some people plan to have an appraisal and some don't. It's more of a time issue so that you'll know that. It's just a good thing to get up front. B is cash transaction from other source. B, section 16. newer agents may not know what other source means. Warren, you could probably hit other places money can come from.
Well, you get money from tax refunds, you get money from closing a prior home, you get monies from family members. Many different sources are out there. And if it's a gift, it's important to know where it comes from. Because gifts, believe it or not, are not a good thing unless they're handled properly. And that's back to our discussion with lenders and underwriters, because they don't want someone else having a first mortgage in front of them. And it could be easily interpreted that way. I can't tell you how many times people said, you know, I want to get the monies from this friend of mine, and they're going to give me $15,000, $20,000, and I'm going to handle that separately. Well, at closing, I get a mortgage from them. What do I do? Who's first? You know, now I've got to call this person and say, guess what? You don't have a first mortgage. And I don't represent you, by the way. But the lender is the one that's going to get the first mortgage, because that's who I'm doing the title search for. Everybody good with that? Any questions?
And I know I've had, and I'm sure some of you have had, I'm coming into an inheritance.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, you know, who's your attorney? Because that could be 3 years from now or next week. So watch for those. And the reason we put these in here, it's a place for you to ask questions so you can find out while you're just sitting getting going on this if you've got an issue that may arise. That's the main idea.
Yeah, and look out for scams on the inheritance part. The last 6 months, I've received notification from Canada that I've been privy to inheritance of $7 million, $4.5 million, and $45 million. And all I had to do is call. Okay, so keep in mind there's things like that out there. There's scammers. And we'll probably talk about some scams too that happen. We've had 2 or 3 incidences where we've received a cashier's check from the Bank of Canada. They use Canada a lot. And it looked good. It looked like a perfect certified or cashier's check. So I took it over to the bank and I said, can you clear this for me? And they looked at it and it's missing 1 routing number. So it's enough to get it in your account, and then they'll call you and cancel it and demand their funds back. So keep that in mind.
Good to know.
All right, sorry, that's just a sidebar, but I run into those too.
Yes, very good. C talks about the mortgage. Within 5 calendar days from contract acceptance, buyer to make best effort to apply for conventional FHA, VA, rural housing, or other mortgage at an interest rate not to exceed blank % per annum for blank years with monthly payment of principal and interest only not to exceed, and then we have our blank. Buyer agrees to proceed with due diligence to obtain said financing. In the event said financing cannot be obtained after buyer's good faith efforts, this contract may be terminated by buyer. In such event, both parties shall sign a mutual release and the buyer's earnest money deposit shall be returned. Why is it important, Warren, that the seller gets to know what type of loan they're getting?
Many of you probably have done VA, FHA loans or represented people who are doing that. There are certain costs that cannot be assigned to the buyer. You need to prep your sellers to be prepared to pay for those costs, because otherwise you won't have a closing. Matter of fact, on a VA and some of the FHAs, they make sure that the seller understands that. And they sign a document that they're not taking any monies in addition to the funds they're receiving at closing. That's those outside deals that you'll have the thought of saying, well, this won't hurt, this won't be a bad thing, we'll just do this outside of closing. Well, they can be a real problem for the buyer if it does happen, and the FHA or VA finds out about them. Now, you as a realtor, I wouldn't recommend that you try to quote everything that the buyer cannot pay for. What I would recommend is that it's a VA, FHA type of loan or rural housing, and that seller, you need to be prepared that there are certain costs that you will have to pay, and they may be within $1,000, $2,000 of that. So keep that in mind when you're pricing the property, so that that can be adjusted and your sellers aren't saying, well, I'm not taking home what I thought I was going to take home because of this type of loan. It makes a difference. So prep them that they're going to have certain costs. No matter what you have in your contract, VA's not going to approve it. FHA may not approve it. Okay? And then someone's got to pay for it. And if you haven't prepped your seller and your buyer can't pay for it, who gets to pay for it? How many of you have helped share in some of those costs? Yeah. See, it happens because if it's a large enough transaction, it's worth for someone to chip that in, right? Now, guess what that counts as? A gift. Did y'all think about that? Now, does VA and FHA need to know that? Technically, yes, they do. So prep them so they're paying for it correctly, not that you're in the middle of something and now you are making a gift that has to be disclosed. Okay?
And to go with that, the RHS, if you see that and you are representing your seller getting ready to present it to them, you already know you're probably going to have seller concessions, and they're here. And that's how you can help begin to explain to the seller what that means. And that it doesn't have to be scary, but you take that into consideration with your negotiations.
Correct.
Also, Warren, I'm sure, feels that this is another place we do not put to be determined. It's
Oh, no.
important to know what the interest rates are. It's important to go on and figure out what your principal will be.
Phil,
I did that for one little lady one time, and she went, "Oh, I can't pay that every month." Well, she could, but it scared her, and so you need to know those things now. Go ahead.
no, that's good. And I was going to say, please fill in every blank on that one. If you can't or don't have the means to calculate it, make sure you get your buyer to someone, some lender, whoever they're using, and get that information. Because I think lenders are willing to assist in that, at least give you maximum limits or minimum limits or something like that, that they could help you fill that in, simply because you don't want any misunderstanding. Like you say, you don't want to get there and they figure out that I can't afford this. Yeah.
Are there any questions on financing?
Why do we use calendar days instead of business days? I mean, if I write a contract Friday afternoon and Monday's a legal holiday, I can't get a hold of the bank, it cuts it pretty close.
It does, and we talked about that. It was a joint decision in the MLS group with the brokers and the reps, just not to take up a lot of time.
But now keep in mind, this is the buyer to make best effort to apply for. And that doesn't necessarily cancel it, it just means they make the attempt. Now, you know, within, if you got a holiday, typically you got Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, typically. The only time we have a longer period of time might be potentially over Thanksgiving, but even at that, the banks are open the day after Thanksgiving, so they can at least apply or make the attempt to apply.
So a phone call to the bank is...
As long as the lender can back it up. See what I'm saying? You want them to back it up. Now this, when it says makes their best efforts to apply, it's going to be hard to terminate a contract because what's best efforts? That's going to be interpreted by what's reasonable, and they're going to understand that there's a holiday. But now what may not be reasonable is this contract is signed and it's to close 90 days from now or 60 days from now, and the buyer has not done anything toward financing until the 45th, 50th, 60th day, which has happened. And now everybody's in a scramble rush to fix it. And then we're rushing through a title search that looks like we've gone through the, complete index book at Callaway County Court Clerk's Office. I mean, we may have 14 or 15 pages of names that we didn't know we were going to search until we've got 2 days to do it, or 3. That could be a problem.
Warren, would it be helpful if we make sure, when we start showing property, I ask, have you been pre-qualified with banker? Which banker are you working with? And if they have a pre-qualification letter, when you write the offer, and they're writing the offer for less than that, would it be acceptable to, we can figure what a payment is for
Okay.
30 years, a certain percentage, and if it's less than what the qualification letter is, or exactly as that, so we take the responsibility of filling that in, and then we can verify. That is if the banks are closed.
Oh yeah, that's
Well,
fine.
If we have a qualification letter, that's going to
Well,
raise a lot of questions.
I think a
all the way through.
pre-qualification letter maybe even says, it probably takes it out of the realm of best effort. I think they've already exercised best effort
Right.
to see if
I
they
like to do
qualify.
that. It's not fair to the seller to
Yeah.
just drag people through.
So if you
and
think-
find out, yeah, they couldn't even afford it to begin with. Not fair to the buyer.
No, that's true. But I think it helps if you have a pre-qualification letter, because
that
now
would-
they've already made the effort to know what they, see, the bank is going to have certain inspections probably, but basically you know this person can pay for this type of loan, and that's a huge part of this paragraph.
And I think it would make it smoother from the transition.
Right.
It's just a suggestion.
Any other questions on that before we go on?
Could you address, like, what if, sometimes people think they're gonna get a certain type of loan, we write the contract up, and then the loan program changes? Would that need an amendment on the contract that the seller agreed? Because like you said, there's.
I don't think that's going to be an integral part of that.
Because the seller's gonna have to agree that, yeah.
Well, now, if they're changing from conventional to VA, yes.
I mean, it's gonna change, sometimes it'll change the down payment.
Mhm. So I would say, to be on the safe side, do an addendum. And then that gives the other party an opportunity to disclose to the seller.
Yes, I understand. Now they have fees
Correct.
or
Yeah.
different inspections.
And that
Right.
happened.
Yeah. But if it goes from VA or RHS, to FHA to conventional, it's not quite as critical. Right. But when you go the other direction, it's important. They need to know what the
Because I
seller.
think sometimes we've gotten on into a contract and we find out that they're getting a different type of loan.
Right.
That was in the contract and
Why didn't I know it was moved to?
Yeah.
And then tell everybody to talk really loud. We can barely
Oh, I'm sorry.
hear
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We'll get louder. Okay, let's go on to earnest money. This is a bulkier paragraph than it was before. In our last contract form, we had sprinkled throughout the thing how you get your earnest money back. We have put all of that in this form, so if you've got a buyer and they go, what if this happens, will I get my money back? You can go right to section 3, it should be found in there somewhere. Let's go over it quickly. Buyer, as evidence of good faith, shall deposit blank amount in the escrow account of the broker, which sum shall be applied to the purchase price or returned to buyer upon the closing of this transaction. The earnest money deposit shall only be removed from a real estate broker's license account upon, number 1, performance, that is your closing, number 2, written agreement of the parties, or number 3, a court order in accordance with KRS 324.1116. Failure of the parties to agree upon escrow distribution shall result in the broker initiating the procedures also described in that statute. The buyer retains full right to said deposit if seller fails to accept this offer. The loan described in section 2 cannot be obtained by buyer despite buyer's diligent efforts. Survey showing uncured defects and not remedied, nor non-identification of boundaries pursuant to section 6. Unresolved repairs pursuant to section 5. The title of property is unmarketable, or the appraisal does not come in at or above purchase price. The seller shall be entitled to earnest money deposit upon default by buyer, including buyer's failure to timely seek financing as described in section 2, or to comply with any other material obligation imposed under this agreement. By retaining the earnest money, the seller may still seek further remedies. Either party, upon a default, may seek specific performance.
I'm sorry, but that last sentence or so that you wrote is not in my,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Turn the page.
Is it on the other side? Turn.
it's right here. Put this in. Oh, thank you.
Okay,
Take
we're
this
together.
copy.
We're together. We're together.
Got it, thank you.
This, I think, will help because we've got all the different areas that your thing could have issues there. I want to stop and ask Warren on this one. When we do come to an end and it's not going to work, and the seller says, I'm not going to give their money back, and the buyer says, I want my money back, usually standing in your office, and you're wearing an escrow hat, then we do have to go into the method of sending out certified letters, waiting 60 days, and the broker that is holding the money has to really play God at that point and say who's going to get the money. I have never felt truly comfortable doing that, even though I thought I knew who should get the money, and I have done it. Can you speak to that? Is there a liability for us in any way in making choices like that?
I think there's a slimmer liability because the statute attempts to protect you on that, and that's why the statute was written, okay? Because many of the brokers were getting sued because they would give an escrow check out to somebody, and maybe there was a defense or a reason that they shouldn't do it. It was a buddy instead of factual evidence. Before you make that determination, look at the facts of the closing. Look at the facts of why it didn't close. Did somebody not do something under the contract? So if that's the case, then obviously the reason for selecting who gets the money, the escrow money, is going to be because it's a non-breaching party, typically. And your defense, if someone accuses you of not making that choice correctly, is, well, the breaching party didn't do this. They didn't get this done. They didn't do it according to the contract. They took something they shouldn't take, or there was a major issue there. You have a defense based on what the breaching party has done. Now, if you decide to give the breaching party the money back, I think you got a huge misunderstanding now with the other party that's not breaching the agreement. Now they're going to say, why did you do that? Try to take you to court over that. That's where you get into liability. So if you build your file, and you build the file by writing information in it about who told you what when, who did what, date and time. Now I know a lot of you get tired of dating and timing things, but I can tell you it has become important in many sources of litigation. If you can do that and get a complete synopsis of who's the seller and what the seller has done or didn't do, and the buyer did or didn't do, and then you make your determination like that, two things occur. You have a record of what it is that helped you make your decision to select which party gets it. And if you have to go to court, your record can be presented as evidence. So now you have something to say at the time this was occurring, this is what I had experienced. That helps because most of the time, I don't know about you guys, but my memory doesn't work the same way it did before. And if 2 years down the road at a trial, you're asking me who said what at a closing, it's not going to happen unless I wrote it down. And typically, if you file a lawsuit today in the Callaway County Court Clerk's Office, you'll get a trial date next year. That's how backed up the docket is. So let me know how good your memory is, and then we'll go from there. Most of the time, you follow the procedures under KRS 324-1116, and you make your decision based on your factual determination of who breached what. Now, that statute's going to protect you because the reasonable doubt is placed of record by your information in your file. You know, who is it that breached? And so you do that, you follow the procedure. You have to notify both parties, the seller and the buyer anyway. This is your choice. This is your decision. Okay, if nobody contacts you to contest it, you're covered. All right? If someone contacts you to contest it, what's your remedy? You can't disperse then. What you do, contact the attorney that you want to represent you, file a lawsuit against both parties, pay the money into court, you're covered. You're out of it now. Okay? Keep in mind, escrows are not your money. So you're giving it to the court so the court can decide. You back out of it, you now are a witness. You know, you're the evidentiary part of it. You're not going to be sued because you failed to do something correctly. That's why the statute was put together, to help you stay out of these lawsuits.
And just a quick question, because the last sentence talks about it doesn't take away their rights to do specific performance. I know we rarely do this in Murray. Have you ever handled anything like that?
Yes, I have.
There you go.
And it's been several years ago, but I wrote a contract. It wasn't through a realtor, by the way. And we had parties come to want me. One attorney represented the seller, I believe it was, and I was representing the buyer. And I wrote a contract and I put specific performance in the contract. And for no apparent reason, these parties, the seller didn't want to sell it. And we got notice of that. And I told them, we have specific performance here. And they said, well, we're just going to forfeit the escrow amount. And I said, no, 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 no. My clients want the property. They're not interested in the $500. I sued. Guess who won? We did, because there was no valid reason for the breach by the seller. Now, had there been one, we probably would have lost that. But, you know, it's called the clean hands doctrine. You've got to have someone come in with pure, clean conduct, pure, clean hands, that they're not a party to a default or a deception. And then the law gives you the benefit of the doubt most of the time. And so that case went to, before it went to trial, they agreed to sell the property. But we had the upper hand on that one.
And that specific performance can be used by either buyer or seller.
That's correct.
Are there any questions on this section? Yes, ma'am.
So you put the broker's name up here, and not the office name?
What's that mean?
That's what we've always had, I think. Do you think it needs to be the,
Well, I mean, I didn't think, it didn't have broker there before, we usually write office names in there.
anybody on the MLS remember? I don't think we made it up.
That is the change.
The office, yes,
Because our brokerage is not owned by the broker.
Understood. Okay, good point. All right, we can go back.
Yeah.
What are we changing now? Put a brokerage.
Just put brokerage firm.
Instead of broker.
Thank you, Earlene.
Yes. I'm sorry?
The title attorney is holding the deposit.
Okay, the question is, what if the attorney holding the escrow deposit, you get to closing and you've delivered your escrow deposit to the closing attorney?
No, when the contract is written, because it's going to be closing, it's a cash transaction, it's a large deposit.
Okay.
You make it to the title.
Okay. In either situation, the attorney is holding the deposit. I will recommend to the attorney to follow this statutory requirement also, because it's not only to protect you, it's to protect anybody who holds escrow funds.
So we should change that to say broker or closing attorney's escrow.
Right, but the attorney should know to do that. But if they don't, they need to follow that. Yeah.
Okay, I had one, a HUD, and we left that blank, and I just put on the back, I mean, that was a requirement of the HUD that go to the closing attorney.
Okay.
Earns money, and I just put that as, you know, in the additional, whatever the part is.
Yeah. And that might be the thing to do, put broker firm or closing or escrow agent.
And I just did it on the back, I left that part blank, and just still, you know.
And that would be a good modification, because that statute deals with escrow funds. It just happens to be in the real estate section. And anybody dealing with the real estate escrow accounts are still accountable to both parties. I mean, I would hate to have to make a decision on that.
Any other questions?
Do you have a question?
Should we just strike through the word broker and just leave it to say in the escrow account of blank, and then you write in the appropriate? And just take the word broker.
Well, I guess you could just put escrow, if you want to change broker to escrow account holder. That covers broker, that covers everybody.
And it does, yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
See, we're still molding this thing. That's good. All right, we'll change it.
To make it older.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay.
I have one question.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
There's nothing in here that states anything about I had a certain incident with a property that we went to do the home inspection and found that the disclosure stated nothing, lying right through them. Okay, obviously, that's not right. But the disclosure stated that there was nothing wrong with the property. We get to the property, the home inspector arrives, we find out that the same home inspector we hired disclosed to us that he actually did a home inspection on this exact same house 7 months prior with the same seller. Nothing was disclosed. Went through with the home inspection, paid the money to have the inspection done, found out that the house has some very, very serious issues. My buyer is an attorney, and the attorney said to me, I do not even wish to ask for repairs on this house. This is a defunct home. It has significant issues. The seller was not upfront about problems that we've had. I want to get out of this contract, and I want my earnest money back.
Right.
We
We've
don't
taken,
really have anything in the
we've
contract
taken
that
care of
states.
that when you get into another section.
Okay, I
You're
apologize.
protected. No,
Okay.
that's good, because that has been an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll get there. Anybody else? Okay, one page down, we're almost there, guys. Deep breath, deep breath. Number 4, property inclusion. We have bulked this one up a little bit too and added a few things to it to help you. The term property as herein used shall include the land together with all improvements thereon, all appurtenant rights, privileges, easements, fixtures, and all of the following items if they are now located on the real estate or used in connection therewith. Electrical wiring and equipment attached, plumbing, HVAC, shades, blinds, awnings, curtains/drapery rods, window screens, storm doors, shrubbery, landscaping, affixed mirrors, affixed floor covering, wall-to-wall carpeting, garage door opening device, built-in appliances such as microwaves, ovens, stovetops, disposal dishwashers, affixed furniture, built-in furniture, ceiling fans, utility buildings, storage buildings, sheds, gas logs, mailboxes, and posts, plus all articles so attached or built in which would leave premises in a damaged, incomplete, or unfinished condition. Any boat dock permit transfer must occur through appropriate authorities, TVA/Corps of Engineers, and the following appliances shall remain. I'm going to stop there because Warren talked to me when I sat with him that time on the, we have a lot of things that close at the lake. And you and I, we didn't have the TVA
Right.
and all that in there. Maybe you want to explain why that is important, that that's covered.
Well,
And the dock permit.
Dock permit, well, basically, those are issued through TVA or the Corps of Engineers. You're not in control of those, and the sellers are not in control of transfer of those. Basically, the seller has a license to use that facility, and that's what they get. It's a letter from TVA. There is no ownership interest in it. TVA could come by and tell them to remove it at any time. And so that's why I recommend through the appropriate authorities, Corps of Engineers or TVA, and that may take some time. They're a government entity and they don't get in any hurry sometimes. And you know, you need to get a letter from them confirming that they understand a transfer is occurring and that this license will be issued to a new buyer. If they will do that for you, get as much as you can from them that they understand that the existing structure is going to remain. Now, most of the time, the structures are not going to be satisfactory to the buyer. That's a huge problem because what was approved is what's out there. When they start adding more slips, TVA permit does not allow for that without them approving the slips and approving the structure. So just because they've got a permit from TVA, unless they've got clear understanding that there will be additions made to that, TVA could ask them to remove it. Okay? They can be real
We
sticky.
had a situation that might be helpful if you knew that. This is a long time ago. Sold a lake, had a lake property under contract. There was a dock there. They did those things. And so when they got ready to go to the closing and they verified it, the dock had been torn, the original dock had been issued to a neighbor, to an adjacent property owner. A storm had torn it away. The guys got together, the neighbors, and said, we'll just build one together. We'll just call it. So they, without getting a permission, they built another dock, and they both thought they owned it. Go to closing, the neighbor says, I built the dock, it's on my property, he helped me and we're sharing it. There was no written agreement, TVA had not approved it, the sale did not happen.
Right.
But it's to remember, just because you see a dock doesn't necessarily mean it's
That's
been
approved.
under issue.
That's exactly right.
And it's complicated to even get them to go down and look at it,
Yes.
TVA people.
Yeah.
But
TVA is very funny about that. Sometimes they'll send a representative down just to drive the lakes area. This happened many years ago, and they found a client of mine had a house that was built right on the line to where you can have a structure or not. And so they had added a deck to their house. They got a letter from TVA saying you must tear down your house. And the only thing encroaching was the portion of the deck. And so we went round and round with TVA, and they determined that the house had to come down. The house had been built for 35, 40 years.
They couldn't just take off the deck?
Here's how we solved that. We got a chainsaw and cut the deck off from the house. Made it a freestanding structure in an area that's in a flood zone. Approved it, no problem. It's a government agency. Keep that in mind. They look at the words. They don't think about practical application. All right? So, you follow the words, you're good to go. Yes?
So you're saying in this that if we have a lake property with a boat dock, by having this sentence in here, I took it that it was just to alert the buyer that they would have to transfer the dock. But you're saying we need to have something from TVA?
To approve the transfer, that's correct.
They won't approve the
They won't
transfer.
approve.
They won't.
The buyer has to do it after they buy the property. They will not approve the transfer.
Then you need to warn your seller, your buyers then that this is going to be subject to the
We need to change
permit.
that writing some way.
Yeah.
because
Well, I think
they
it's,
will not approve a boat dock transfer until the property has sold and the buyer reapplies for the dock permit, so we can't meet that.
well, it's not saying, you can verify.
Existing dock permit.
That's correct.
That's what,
Yeah.
that's what I
all we
thought.
can
Okay.
do, and say you'll
Yeah.
have to transfer it after
That's
sale.
what I
Yeah.
thought this meant.
And they will
Okay.
not, they will not tell us, yes, we will or not, we'll just have to look at it again, so we can't meet that in the way.
Well, it's not necessarily saying you have to meet it in this sentence. Basically, it was put in there to make sure that someone contacted TVA
And follows through.
and follows through with it. Your buyer needs to follow through.
I mean, that-
Well, if they're not going to do it before, then make sure they do it afterwards. Or they're subject to a problem with TVA at some point. So just make them aware of it is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
We attended a TBA seminar last year, and it was my understanding from that the seller has to initiate this.
Okay,
You have to show that they own it and so forth and so on, and then,
okay.
and there's a fee, pretty substantial fee. for
And you're
the
really
transfer,
supposed to
so-
transfer that in within
Yeah.
90
90 days, yeah.
And they're pretty quick, actually.
Are they? Well, good.
They're a government agency. but
Yeah.
they are- They're pretty
We
good.
just
at
have
that.
going through that at our house.
Uh-huh.
And we've been waiting for 3 months.
Okay. See, I've had
It's supposed
one.
to come out sometime.
I've had one that went 6 to 8 months, but I didn't do the application. I typically do not handle the TVA applications. You put a lawyer in the mix of this, it will be forever. And I'll tell you why. Because TVA thinks you've lawyered up. So they're going to lawyer up. And their lawyers don't get to anything within 6 or 8 months. You
Well,
know?
and a lot of it, it depends on if you're just simply transferring the permit as is, or if you're gonna
Alter the structure.
altering the dock.
Right.
But
Even
don't
with
we
just
wanna put
transferring.
the dock, I mean, I've always included dock as something that's being transferred. Is this where we would want to do that, where it's property included?
Yeah, and you might want to say that the seller will cooperate with the buyer on initiating or getting approval, if need be,
Because, I mean,
through the
dock
proper
will
authorities.
assume The dock goes with the house, but it doesn't.
No,
It
no.
says that the dock is being transferred.
Right. Yes.
So,
Or included in the sale.
I think we left it out because of that. So you would add it,
As a
Here
potential.
or on the back.
I would add it here because
Then I'm gonna suggest we take, look, that last word is the following freestanding compliances are to remain. There's nothing else, I mean, do we just,
No, we listed.
And vote
one.
on permit.
but what I'm
Or to
saying is, would you still just write in a sentence, in addition, the dock is included in the sale?
right,
Yeah.
I would put it there.
Yeah, or you can do it on the addendum section if you want.
Would it be possible, because of the language, and we are not to practice law, that you write up a little phrase that we can use because it was drawn by an attorney instead of what we think it ought to say?
Mhm.
Would it be possible for you to do that and have it to the board so we can insert that?
Sure, be glad to do that. And it's going to be generic, but it's going to be more of an informational thing to say who has to do what.
I think that's great.
Because
We're not going to write it.
TVA may very well change their requirements. I mean, I know that Phil's got some, and I'll get with Phil to make sure what his seminar revealed. But, you know, the critical part is you don't want this just floating out there and then 2 or 3 years down the road, your buyers come back to you and say, TVA is telling me I've got to take my dock down. Why? Okay, Jeff, you had a question?
yeah, so the question really is related to this sentence about the boat dock. Is this a condition that must be met as part of the contract, in your opinion?
No,
Or is
no.
it just a general statement?
It's a general statement. It's a general statement because,
I think that was
if you make it a part of the contract,
This has to be done, and that's not.
The boat permit transfer may occur through.
must occur through appropriate authorities.
Making it sound like it must occur in order for the contract to be fulfilled.
No, it's just saying that you can't do it by deed.
Maybe something extra should be said.
Just because you're buying.
Just because you're buying the property doesn't go with the property.
We'll let him write us down.
Yeah, I'll write that up, and we'll get it
guys,
to
I
you.
do this I mean, there were 4 of us that went to Paris for that training, and if that comes up again, I'm amazed that more people didn't go. Any of us that sell like property should have attended that. It was wonderful. So.
Bonnie?
I did have something similar to what Warren had. I had a listing, and when I was checking with TVA about the transfer and what was there, because there was an argument over one dock versus another dock, the person that owned the property at the time did not have any rights to the dock that was issued to that property.
Mhm.
So, and it was back, at least one, maybe 2 owners, and so they told me at TVA, it doesn't matter. Right now, that dock doesn't belong to anybody that's on either of the 2 deeds on either property. And they like little, and they stuck, they're real close together. Heating and Air actually set on the line. That's how little the lots was. But he said none of the docks are owned by the people that are on the deeds to those properties at this time. Of course, they're not owned by them anyway.
No, they
That's
just
the
have
thing. And, one guy was saying, this is
Yeah.
my property, and he said, I said, no, it's not, it's TVA's property. And then when I contacted TVA, none of them were issued to the right people.
And that's another thing with TVA property. Most of the water lots, some of you may have encountered this, some of you not, but technically below a certain level, TVA owns that. And when you're selling a piece of property, you might want to inform the buyers that someone could be camping down there. There's not a thing they can do about it. Because if they're on TVA property, they're authorized to use that as public use area. And that really upset some people with a $400,000 house back behind it.
So if other people are using your boat dock, you can't go ask them.
They can't get on your dock.
They can't get on your dock, but they can camp on the area that TVA owns. And the other thing that pops up on these boat docks is sometimes TVA limits the number of docks in an area.
Yeah.
And now you're talking about an easement across maybe your property that your buyer is purchasing to get from another adjoining neighbor. And do you need a written easement for that? Or do you make them go down to the weeds and walk around TVA property? Historically, everybody says, well, we've always taken this path, and it's across your client's property. What has that just done after 15 years? There's an adverse possession issue on easement, right? Yes. So we need to know that, because otherwise you're going to try to stop that person from coming across. It's been done for 15 plus years adversely, and now they have an easement by prescription. Very simple. Yes.
If we can move on from the dock situation, because that's a,
Yeah.
it's a deep
I'll
subject.
do that.
I've got a question on the language. This does say that if they are now located, if these items are now located on the property. In the past, there have been issues where it lists that the drapery rods were there or the screens were there, and the new buyer expected to have those because they were listed. And at one time in my real estate life, we marked out what was not there. Does this language that's saying if they're now located protect us from that type of situation?
It should, but now I can't tell you how someone's going to interpret that as a buyer. Okay? Because the problem we have is that nobody hears the same thing. We're making an attempt to make it where if they're located on the property, then at the time of the contract, we need to know that. But I can't tell you that's going to stop any issues. It may very well still have the same issues.
But if you're saying like if the house doesn't have screens,
Yeah.
and this says that the seller doesn't have to go in and put screens.
Right.
And in one case that I am well aware of, there was a water softener that was listed in this, and there was no water softener on it. And so the realtor had to cough up the water softener. So I want to make sure that if it doesn't have a disposal, I'm not stuck with it because it's stuck here. Does that make sense?
Why don't we add some language to that?
How strong that language, if
Okay.
now on the premises
Okay, or why don't we add after each one of those things that you have a concern about, put if any.
Or can I just strike those that I know that aren't there?
If you strike through them, then let them initial it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Jeff?
Sorry, one other question.
No.
As regards to the left in a damaged or incomplete condition, the surround sound speakers and or mounts, seller takes those with them. Now you got holes in the drywall. Is that?
I think
damaged
that's damaged condition.
Yeah.
I
condition?
do.
Run into that?
I think we had a case years ago in Callaway County. I don't know if someone might remember this. There was a built-in desk in a bedroom that was made into an office. And so the desk was built in, and so when the sellers left, they took the desk with them. Well, when they took the desk, it was down to particle board. They had put the flooring up to it, but they did not put it underneath it. And so there was a lawsuit over that, I believe, and I think that constituted a fixture.
So the best idea is to take the speakers, leave the mounts.
That's correct.
Same on TV.
And if you're going to do that, put that in excluded items. Put that in excluded items.
We do on the speakers, but we forget about those mounts.
Yeah, but now you got to, if you take the mounts, put the mounts are excluded, there may be damage, and then I think you need to disclose then to the buyer. Yeah,
Same thing.
Fix the wall.
Wall mounted television.
correct.
Then you gotta paint it.
I know.
It goes on and on.
Yeah, it's a never-ending domino effect. Could be.
Anybody else on this? Okay. It says, the next one is, if you are excluding something, that needs to be there. Make sure you ask your sellers if they are excluding something. You don't need to find that out during walkthrough, like Warren said, it's gone.
Right.
If they had at least said that on the exclusion on the desk, we wouldn't have had that issue. Where you did that.
Or if they replace a refrigerator or replace a
Yes.
chandelier, that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely, all of that. And this goes, guys, to landscaping. Velda Sue has a good one on that years ago. How many bushes were removed?
52.
I use
52 bushes.
I use her example as a teaching tool in class. That was amazing.
And the arbor.
Mhm.
And when they were taking it, they backed over the sewer line. It was, he handled that one, didn't he?
Mhm, I think so.
Okay, yeah, it is 10 o'clock now. Do you want to take a quick break and come back? You want to plow through? I'll do whatever. Okay, take a quick break, guys, 10 minutes. Okay, let's get going again, guys. We're on page 2. After the excluded part, there is very bold. Every time we put something in bold, it's because it's important. Any personal property not specifically listed above shall not remain with the property. Buyers should not rely upon items to be left in the multiple listing system or advertising. I know we have seen agents, when you receive an offer, and I will see it written in items to be left, those that are in the MLS. And Warren can explain why that is not.
The MLS is not the contract between the buyer and seller. Now, that's where you get notice of it. But if you just put that language in there, do you know if your buyer has looked at the MLS to understand that they may or may not be getting some items? That's why it needs to be reiterated in here. And probably to more detail in here than what's typical on MLS. It's easy to make that as an exclusion because it's easy to say, but you got to have people understanding how many items that is, what it is, to what degree. Most buyers are in a fog anyway because they don't pay attention to that detail like you guys do. And so you have to relay that to them. And then they get to closing and they say, oh dear, I thought I was getting that. What are you going to do? And then the other thing too that sometimes happens, I've heard 2 or 3 times where people are trying to sell land, real estate, and then there's a separate agreement to buy the personal property. Mm-hmm. Okay, now, I think it's going to be confusing if you keep writing those personal items. If it's more than 1 or 2 things or 4 or 5 things, no, you can add it in here. But if we're talking about a household of furniture or a furnished house, it'd be a good idea to get a complete itemization and a separate personal property contract that's contingent upon the sale of the real estate going through. Okay? Because you don't want them buying the personal property and not buying the house. But you need to identify what's going and what doesn't go, because you're going to wind up getting a situation that can be confusing. What is it that stays? What is it that's leaving? You don't want the buyers thinking they're getting everything in the house, and the seller thinks, well, that just means the chairs and tables. You know, it really means plates, dishes, appliances, things like that, if it's vague enough. And so that's where you need to sit down and get specifics so that everybody's on the same page, what stays and what's being purchased separately. Okay? So just add that as a thought.
And if it is not a cash deal, as you all know, our lenders do not want to see all that personal property stuck in there because they don't know the value of it. Yes.
Linda, another suggestion, if you are doing a bill of sale, a separate transaction for equipment, for say a tractor or a mower, anything that would have a serial number, I think you need a better description and put the serial number on it because they can swap out.
That's right.
Or you can't just say tools, you need to really be specific.
4 or 45, right? Yeah.
I wonder why we have these questions. We've seen this.
Yes, we have. Becky, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wondered because we don't have propane tanks named anywhere. Is that considered a freestanding appliance if it's owned?
Well, that's the big issue. Is it owned or is it? That's a huge first question. Most people have said that's been there all the time we've had it. When we bought it, it was there. Guess what? It still may be owned by the company. So you need some verification who owns that first. And then if it does, then you need to incorporate that, if it's owned by the seller, probably into this is what you're buying, or they're paying extra for it. And then something else that occurs too, what if it's full of propane?
Right.
Who pays for that? Are they giving that away? I've had 2 or 3 hotly contested issues over, I just filled the tank up. Why don't they pay me for that? Well, it's not in the agreement. And is that a fixture? There's a huge argument that could be a fixture. Because guess what? The heating and air unit doesn't work unless that is connected. Problem is you can remove the tank and it does not affect the value of the property. Because someone can still contract with another gas company and have a new tank brought out and filled. So I don't think a propane tank is going to constitute a fixture in the big scheme of things. So that does need to be addressed. Yes?
Speaking to the propane, if there is remaining propane in that tank and it were to be prorated, let's say there's 80% or 50%, would that not come under the prorations in number 10?
No, because that's still personal property. See? Yeah, unless you specifically say that, you have to write it in. Does number 10 have prorations for that? Yeah.
Put that on number 16.
Yeah, you can put it under 16 or have an attachment or 16 additional terms. You could put it there. Yeah. But it needs to be addressed.
Anybody else? Okay. Number 5, inspections. This is where the MLS group, the committee, spent much of our time because this is typically where we have our biggest issues. I know we're sweet people because we're all still friends, because we've had times where buyers want out and the sellers don't want them out, and we're stuck in the middle trying to make sure everybody's happy. We tried to improve this, and I hope you will agree. Let's start through it. Buyer may have inspections made at buyer's expense to determine whether there are undisclosed significant and or unsafe defects in the property, improvements, or personal property if included, including but not limited to, those are Warren's good words, to presence of wood-destroying organisms and verifications of square footage. Seller will pay the cost of turning on all utilities for inspections and re-inspections. Seller will remove all personal belongings and or debris that might obstruct a thorough inspection of the property and its improvements. Buyer will pay for re-inspections, reports, and certificates if required. Buyer's agent shall notify the seller's agent in writing within blank calendar days Warren specifically said we should call this the inspection period so that it's very clear what that time period is of the contract date. And the contract date, as you see, begins at time of last party signature, so we know exactly when the clock starts ticking. Of any such defects and or presence of wood destroying organisms, with a repair request and a copy of the portions of the inspection report pertaining to said repairs. Repair request is for correction, repair, and or replacement of specific items needed to bring the item to their standard operating condition, considering the age, the quality, age, and value of such item. Full home inspections are specific for revealing significant defects, including but not limited to mechanical, structural, and safety defects. Buyer acknowledges that the property, if not new construction, has some inherent characteristics that are present in properties of this age and may not be up to the current code. Let me stop at that paragraph quickly. We have added at the top the square footage in the third line. Remember, that's been a separate paragraph. Things are always huge when the state first tells us to do something. We're all in a panic and we have to stick it in and we may have to make it huge. It is important if your buyer thinks that the property is not the right square footage, but it is covered here. It will be under the same time inspection period as anything else. So if you give 3 weeks or 2 weeks or 10 days, then if they want to go out with you and you hold the dummy end of the tape, you can do that and measure the house. But we put it here so it's not such a separate paragraph. It didn't seem to need that kind of information. Let me go on and then we'll open up for questions. The next bold, for the purposes of the repair request, estimated cost to repair a significant defect may only be provided by a person who is a qualified professional in the field for which he or she is providing an estimate to repair such component or system. If buyer fails to give a repair request within the specified time, buyer shall be deemed to have accepted the property, improvements, and personal property in the condition as of the time they sign the contract date of the contract. If buyer deems the defect significant or unsafe, even if the seller might agree to repair, replace, or correct, buyer may give written notice to void the contract, and earnest money is to be returned to the buyer within the same time frame as in Section 5. There you go, baby. Yes. We have found, and you all well know, once a buyer decides they are not going to buy that property, as Warren has told me, if it's not repairs, he will find, or she, a way out.
Right.
You are only bumping your head up against a wall at that point. Cut your losses, get it back on the market, let somebody else buy it. We've had this time and time again.
Maybe we read this and I didn't catch it. That time for, say, 5 days after contract acceptance, does that also include the negotiating time if
Yes.
we find issues?
This is your time limit to deal with all of that.
That's the whole process.
That is the process.
If they need to have extra time, goes.
You do it in writing.
Amend the contract.
Correct.
Okay.
I think it's important for us to notice that there is no mention whatsoever of who does the inspections. So it leaves it open to licensed inspectors, contractors, you yourself. There's no mention as to the qualifications of a person inspecting the property. So the whole value is going to be hinged on that repair request and estimates by a professional person.
Correct. And I was going to let Warren talk to that.
The one problem that we have seen is that a buddy comes over and crawls under the house. The buddy says you need this or need that. Well, that may not be the case. It's just that it would look better, it might be more efficient or something like that, but is that buddy a licensed professional? No. Is that buddy in the business of being a plumber or being an electrician? Do they have a business to that effect? That's what we were trying to say. If they're in the business of doing something like that, then somewhat they've got experiences. And that's why we were trying to limit it so that they can do it, but not a buddy who can crawl under and say, hey, I know this isn't right or this isn't wrong. Sometimes code is a whole lot different than what people used to do. And, that's the other reason we put that in there is a house may be up to code when it was built, but it won't meet code now for a newly manufactured home. And now you get someone that's a buddy that happens to work for somebody and says, this is wrong. Well, no, it's right. It just so happens it was correct when the house was built. And an electrician or someone that does this business knows that. And you will get into some of those things that you can't avoid based on the new code. And one of them that comes to mind is electrical boxes. If you've got a fuse box, basically some insurance companies take the position that we're not insuring it until you put a breaker box in. So that sort of limits your professional from saying it's all right. See? Yes, ma'am.
We couldn't hear what Gail said.
Oh, and I need to be restating those. I'm sorry.
Because basically, this is saying the buddy can go under there.
Well, the buddy can go under there if they're
The repair
considered.
request comes back when you started looking, I mean, this doesn't say anything in here about a licensed certified home inspection.
No. That's
It
right.
just means anybody can inspect. But when you're dealing with repair requests.
That's right. We want that professional to look at it.
To have to make those.
Right. We have
It's different. This is totally different than what we.
Right. We have a lot of investors who are well skilled. They have bought and sold 15 or 20 houses. They'll crawl the house themselves underneath. They'll look at the electrical and they'll go, I don't want anybody else under it. I'm fine. Fine. Let
That's
them
okay.
check it.
Sure.
As long as they're good with that. But if they start coming back with that person and say, I need repairs, that
Right.
elevates that level just a little bit to get someone that knows what they're doing to look at it. Potentially. Now, that still doesn't alleviate the fact that a buddy or dad or somebody can go in and fix it. But then you're going to want them to understand you're not meeting that requirement. You're going to accept it as is at that point.
And I don't think this takes away our liability of informing people the value of a licensed certified home inspection.
Right.
Absolutely.
We still have to do that, and hopefully that's what we'll still get most of.
Right.
But this obviously addresses, you don't have to do, you can still ask for repairs even if a licensed certified home inspector didn't do an inspection.
Right. And sometimes, home inspectors, the licensed people, you hope they do it correctly, and sometimes they don't. And that's another issue, too. So you've got to be aware of who that is. Had a case several years ago where an inspector said he crawled under the house and did a full inspection. This is in another county. And so the person bought the house, waited maybe 3 or 4 days, and they rummaged around, and then, of course, one day they were drawing water in the bathtub, fell through the floor. Problem. They missed an open cistern under the house by 6 or 8 inches. They could have fallen in a 40-foot cistern. No one knew it was underneath there. Well, the inspection report said the inspector inspected under the house. And so we got to looking at the house, and we looked at the opening that the inspector had to crawl through. How many of y'all know how big a concrete block is? That was the size of the opening. This person that did the inspection couldn't fit under the house. So when asked, how did you inspect under the house? Said, I took a flashlight, shined back in there, and said, did you see the open cistern on the other side of the partition wall? No, is there an open cistern underneath there? And seeing that caused the moisture, which caused the rot that caused the lady to fall through. It's a huge mess. Guess who got to buy the house back? Fortunately the inspector did, or through the company. But that's something too, be careful who you recommend. If you have information that someone's not doing their job, you recommend them, they might tag you with that also, potentially. And so just keep that in mind.
It's important to see too, and we don't talk about it very much, but it is the seller's duty to make sure that the inspector can get in and actually see the walls. We've had some garages. Years ago, I know I had one, and I don't know if it was Serval or McGee. They came over and they said, we've looked as best we can with all the boxes in here. Well, after they were removed and they did the walkthrough, there they were. Those were the little paths going up, and we had termites. We had to go back and have retreating. So people do need to be aware. If you know of rooms or places that they can't actually see, they need to rearrange it, scoot stuff in the middle so you don't have a problem. Any questions on that page before we go to the next page?
Linda, just one other point.
Yes.
And I don't know if Warren wants to address this or not. I mean, the way this is written, we can conceivably get requests and we won't have a full-fledged, legitimate written report because it's not a licensed home inspector who's doing it. So I just think I guess we're just gonna have to go by.
The buyer's going to have to be
request.
satisfied who they have engaged in those services.
And if you look at the next page, it says buyer shall have property inspected by a licensed home inspector or qualified professional.
Yeah.
Right.
What?
On the next
Next page on inspections.
You have any inspections?
Okay, yeah, good, okay.
That
So
was,
they-
when we use the word qualified professional in this, it was bolded because it's mainly to start giving notice that whoever goes in needs to be knowledgeable in what they're looking at.
Or license.
Yeah.
Or
Yes,
like,
ma'am.
yes.
Is the buyer going to have to submit a repair request?
If they don't give one, then it will be deemed that they are accepting it.
Okay, but how does it relate to if buyer deems the defect significant or unsafe, even if the seller might agree to repair or replace correct? Buyer may give written notice. So does that give them the option of either submitting a repair request or submitting a mutual release?
Opting out.
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
And when we do the releases, it does say in there, there is a space that you should write. You shouldn't just say,
Right.
I'm moving to Australia. Put something in there. And I would give the repairs, even though you don't want them done, I would give that so that everybody understands why you're opting out.
Okay.
Okay, the next page at the top. If buyer gives seller a repair request within the time specified, and remember that is your inspection period, that is the time that we're talking about, the seller has 5 calendar days after receipt to enter into written agreement for remedy of the defect with buyer. If seller is unable or unwilling to remedy the defect specific but not limited to, Warren's words, mechanical, structural, and safety, the contract may be voided and the earnest money is to be returned to buyers. Additional negotiations and agreements between the buyer and seller will carry a specific expiration date and time and will be in writing. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Then the next 2 little paragraphs there, this is where they waive inspections or termite inspections so that it's perfectly clear that they will initial it and date and time it that they don't want it. That is for our liability and our help. The first one says they are waiving the termite and wood destroying organism. Buyer agrees to release and hold harmless the seller, agents, and brokers involved in this transaction for any repairs needed or defects that could have been discovered by such an inspection. So if something is found later, they cannot come back on us and say, I should have had it and it's your fault. The next one, buyer waives home inspection of the property and relies solely upon the buyer's examination of the property and agrees to hold harmless the seller, agents, and brokers involved in this transaction for any repairs needed or defects that could have been discovered by such an inspection. Probably no questions there. The next bold,
Jeff has one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry,
No.
I like that we're moving on, but back up where, in that top paragraph,
Yes, sir.
structural and safety of the contract may be voided and earnest money. Does that also allow where a seller contract may be voided? Shouldn't that say may be voided by buyer? Because we don't want to leave that where a seller says, okay,
I'm
I'll
out.
void the contract.
I think that'd be a good idea to put that in
Okay,
there.
let's do that. Thank
We
you,
don't want to give
Jeff.
that option.
No,
to the
that's a
seller.
good idea.
Kill the deal.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't understand exactly what you're saying.
In
Okay,
the
the-
first paragraph, it says, in the next to the last sentence, structural and safety of the contract may be voided. I suggest we add by buyer, because we don't want to allow the seller to get a list of repairs and then void the contract.
Or get another offer.
Right, or take another offer, sure, for any
Okay.
reason.
So we will add that. Very good. That's very good. Thank you. That's why we're doing this. It helps us all. Okay. Then the next bold. Inspections to be scheduled during the inspection period is cited in paragraph 5. And this is where they are specifically saying, yes, I'm going to have a termite inspection. I'm going to have a licensed home inspector come in and do the inspection.
Or qualified.
Or qualified.
Can we define that?
Well, that's...
We toyed with that. It's hard to put a label on that.
Back to her scenario of the investor. Is he a qualified professional?
To him, he is. I mean,
I don't think you can tell some buyer that they must use a licensed inspector.
No, I
They can look at
understand.
it themselves.
What about a
They can't stop
qualified professional as determined by the buyer? What do you think about that?
Well, I had a buyer who's a licensed engineer himself.
Yeah,
And truthfully, the sellers were a little uneasy about that, but we're like, okay, that's crazy. I'm sorry, he's a licensed engineer.
Right.
He's gonna do his own home inspection and request repairs.
Right.
So, and you
It's hard to
have
get past
licensed
that.
Contractors that are not home inspectors, but they're licensed.
well, Kentucky doesn't have a licensing for contractors.
There you go.
See,
Then so there's
all the home
licensed-
builders in
it.
Kentucky,
We can force a buyer to use a licensed inspector.
no, I know, and maybe
I
some
don't
can't
think you
afford
can.
it.
yeah.
Or qualified professional.
That's why we put qualified professional on there.
So,
Is my grandfather a qualified professional? He built my house.
That's
May very well be for your house, though.
It hasn't fallen in yet.
Yeah, because he knows what went into it.
but then the seller still has the right to, okay, I'll go along with it, do the repairs or alone.
Right.
Yeah,
Or if you're bringing an invoice for 4 floor joists to be shorn up again, well, that needs to be from a person who does that on a regular basis.
Yes.
So you at least know it's not from
And
their,
that's in there real
yes,
quick.
where granddaddy makes donuts or something. So. Okay. All right. Are we okay? Okay, let's go on to survey. Number 6. If a survey shows an encroachment on the property or that improvements located on the property encroach on setback lines, easements, land of others, or violate any restrictions, covenants, or applicable governmental regulation, and such condition cannot be remedied by seller prior to closing, buyer may terminate this contract by written notice to seller, and earnest money will be refunded to the buyer. We have 4 choices here. We have added 1 from our last form. I'm going to read through these and then I'm going to let Kathy talk to this because she had the most information when we said in our MLS meeting. The first one is no survey requested by buyer. Pretty straight out. The second one, pinned and staked survey to be paid for by either the seller or the buyer. And that's when you get not only the staking but that lovely big blue piece of paper with all the dimensions on it. This third one, staked verification of corners to be paid by seller buyer. Or the last one, survey to be split equally between buyer and seller. And Kathy talked to Butch and a couple of other people. Yeah. Could you speak to these why we did it this way?
Brian here today?
Yes, over here.
Okay, Brian, you can help me out here too, because he talked to some surveyors. The question had arisen that some surveyors will not just go flag the corners and indicate where the corners are. Chris Jones was one, so I talked to him to find out why he said, I can't go identify the corners, I have to do a complete survey, etc. Then I talked to Butch, who a lot of us use to identify the corners, as to what his interpretation is. There is a state regulation that is open to interpretation. Surveyors disagree about the interpretation of it, and Butch and Chris disagree about the interpretation of it. But Chris thinks, and he said, if my name goes on it, I'm going to have to do a full survey and et cetera, and draw it and everything else. Because he says that the statute says that it should be surveyed, not just the metal detector, but surveyed, and current paperwork provided to indicate that this is where the corners are. So to him, that current paperwork is a full-blown survey. Of course, as we know, that costs quite a bit of money, and they're all behind, so it takes a long time. When I talked to Butch, he said his interpretation is, and he said this, people disagree all over the state as to what this means. And he said, when I go out to identify the corners, he said, I'm identifying, I'm not just out there trying to find some piece of metal in the ground. He said, I'm actually out there with equipment, surveying the points, and if you've worked with him, he gets the track, he gets the Ds, and he said, I identify where those corners are. via survey methods. He said, I will indicate where those corners are, and to him, the current paperwork would be his bill or whatever, showing that that was just done and whatever. So that's why this reads the way it does, either a survey or instead of flagging the corners, which said verification of corners. Okay, so that would be someone going out, and there are others. I think Smith in Paris will identify the corners for you. So, and like Rich said, if I get out there and the plat says that the corner should be here at the top of Becky's head, and it's actually over there, you know, on the top of Melody's head, then we're gonna have to have a survey. But if it says it's on the top of Becky's head, it's actually maybe right here, Becky, I'm using you, right here, Becky's head. You know, if it's like a 1/4 of an inch, an 1/8 of an inch, he said, you know, I'm going to identify that as a corner. That doesn't warrant a full survey. I think in what we need to do, we provided all these. As we know, most sellers are not going to go, I'm not paying for a full-blown survey unless it's acreage and et cetera. Because as Butch said, a platted lot in a subdivision has pins, you know, has been marked by pins and et cetera, is on record at the courthouse. I think it's something that when we're writing with a buyer, we need to explain the difference to them of what that is, and we've been on the property, perhaps guide them or help them understand the difference in what they're suggesting. A lot of them don't want the corner. I mean, they don't care. They just go, you know, that's fine, I don't care. So anyway, that is the difference of these two. I think it's to your discretion as a realtor and to your buyer's discretion what they determine to use as a point of verification of the corners. And you know, I mean, both these are licensed surveyors. They interpret it differently, and he said if the state wants to come down and make that clear or stop me from doing it or tell Chris he can do that, they could, but he said they just kind of, it's just been a controversy. Brian, you talked to some other surveyors at the
It's
time.
the same situation with them. They, the same opinions. It's kind of depending on what you think, you know, if you're a surveyor, how you interpret it. But I think where we got to this, we as realtors, we don't know, we're not surveyors, we don't know warrant corners one way or another. We thought it was a little redundant in Saratoga to have a full-blown brand new survey and repin corners that are already established. You know, when you're already plat recorded at the courthouse, here's the corners, to have to redo all that and reinvent the wheel because it's already sitting there. You know, in another situation, if it's a farm, that's a totally different situation where it may require a brand new survey, but we thought it was redundant to require a full-blown survey.
Didn't you have one too where they could not find one?
Yes,
one
that's
peg?
another situation too. So I mean, you got to use a lot of kind of maybe common sense and interpretation on this and try to just make sure everybody's on the same page when you're buying or seller. I had one where there's 6 corners to it was actually an 1.5 acre house lot, but there were still 6 corners because it was irregular. Well, they found 5, but they agreed to stake the corners, but they found 5 out of the 6 pins. Well, then, you know, where you at then? Well, you don't know where the 6th one is, you know. So you know about where it's supposed to be, but they would not, without a full-blown survey, they wouldn't reset that one pin. So all the situations are different. So I would say handle it very carefully and just make sure your buyer and seller are on the same page.
I think too, if the buyer is asking to have it split by buyer and seller for negotiating reasons, when you go back to your seller, you would probably want to not to exceed on there, because we all know it can suddenly turn from 1 hour's worth of work into 4. And what you thought was going to be $250 is now $1,200. So just something to think about there. Warren, do you have anything on that?
I see the pros and cons on both sides. And as a realtor, broker, whomever, you know, you're not surveyors. So I think, you know, you need to rely on whoever it is that you're dealing with as a surveyor and make sure you get someone that knows what they're doing and can mark them for you correctly. We've had a couple episodes coming through our office where they picked the wrong pin. Because you'll have subdivision line. Usually it's when you have a lot of lots. You have the front lots and you have the back lots. Well, somebody, if they don't know that they're not lining up in the back, will pick the wrong pin, and then now you've got 5 or 6 inches or maybe a foot that they think they own that they don't. We're going through that right now. And that's a huge problem. So you need to know that the surveyor is confident enough that they were picking the right pins when they do that. So,
Good information.
yeah.
Okay, let's go on to number 7. There's nothing here to really talk about. This is just for our protection to make sure we've signed all of our documents. The seller disclosure, the agency, and the lead-based paint. If it does not apply, remember to put NA or something there. Don't leave a blank so that we know that there's nothing to be given. Okay, on to the 3rd page now. Number 8 is title. At closing, an unencumbered marketable title shall be conveyed to buyer by general warranty deed, and then we put, unless otherwise specified in writing, with the usual covenants such as the National Title Insurance Company shall insure free and clear of all liens and encumbrances except easements and restrictions of record. We had thought when we sat as a committee that we should put in there by general warranty deed or special warranty deed or quick claim deed. And then I took it to Warren and he went, oh my. And I'll let him tell you why oh my.
Here's the oh my part of that. If you have a selection of general warranty deed, special warranty deed, and quick claim deed, how many of you know the differences of all those 3?
Enough to be dangerous.
Enough to be dangerous or enough to know to give good advice? I'm not going to quiz you, that's a rhetorical question. But what I have run into is if you're representing the seller, what are they going to want to give? Quick claim deed. They're not responsible for anything. If you're the buyer, what are you going to want to receive? General warranty deed, right? How are you going to resolve that issue if you give them a choice? Typically, the good practice is make sure everybody is guaranteeing that the chain of title is correct, and that's what a general warranty deed does for you. You know, everybody that's given a general warranty deed in the chain of title, as long as it's not been broken in that chain, is responsible for saying that there's good, clear title. There's those bundle of rights that you all get, those of you that's had me in class, remember that? And so you have the right to possess it, own it, occupy it, do whatever you want to with it. However, if you give a specific or a special warranty deed, you only are guaranteeing that during the time that you owned it, you have no encumbrances or nothing occurred to affect title. You are not guaranteeing, and neither are the people behind or the ones you got it from, anything on this piece of property. If you give a quick claim deed, I'll sell you a courthouse right now. I'll sell it to you for $5,000. It's a bargain because you are not even guaranteeing that you own the property if you transfer by quick claim deed. Most lenders do not like to see quick claim deeds because they want to know that good marketable title is still vested in the person they're loaning money to. Okay? So that's the differences. So my thought was that if we give people a selection, you're going to be always in a discussion. Seller saying, I'm going to give a quick claim deed. Buyer, I want a general warranty deed. What if that's the only hang-up you have? How do you resolve it? Oh, we'll meet in the middle, special warranty. Wrong answer. It's not a middle deed.
Our foreclosure companies,
or foreclosure
of course,
companies
are going to
they're
use
notorious, and foreclosure companies are really difficult to. They have their own way, unfortunately, and until we all band together and buck them, I don't think they're going to change. So that was my reasoning for taking that out.
With that said, then, if it is a foreclosure company, we should alert in writing.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what they will be receiving.
Yeah, it'll be a quick claim deed, and they're not guaranteeing anything to it. And then whoever the new lender is, they're going to want to know that I have searched the records back at least 40 to 60 years to ensure that everything's been handled. And then that gets us into a situation of looking at the lawsuit, who foreclosed. Most time a foreclosure doesn't occur with local attorneys. They're usually in Cincinnati, Louisville, Lexington, things like that. And 9 times out of 10, they don't list all the parties to the lawsuit. Guess what? If they're not listed, still lien on the property. And probably one of the most dangerous things that can occur, I know a lot of you have handled these, and that's good, you wish to take those on, but short sales are very, very dangerous. you've got to get a commitment of release from everybody that's got a lien or interest in that property. You fail to do that or compromise that, potential liability. So.
Forget the secondary holder,
Right.
lender. Okay. Are we okay on this one? All right, let's go to the next one quickly. Number 9, closing costs. Seller will pay the state transfer tax and the preparation of the deed. The buyer shall pay for all loan-related costs in the opinion of the title, if such title is defective, and if such defect is not remedied by seller, seller will reimburse buyer for buyer's actual cost incurred for such title opinion. Buyer may also elect to acquire title insurance at buyer's expense. Then we've got it bolded here. VA loans require some items to be paid by the seller, and we've also bolded for cash transaction, the closing fee will be paid for by the buyer. We had the cash transaction before, we did not have the VA, so it's good to have that in there. And I've heard this sitting at a table with Warren and with other closings. The buyer at first didn't want to buy title insurance, but they'll say, can I still buy it? And I guess my question is, how long, or is there ever a deadline for doing that?
There is a deadline for buying owner's title insurance. My title insurance company that I primarily use tells me that once the closing occurs, they will not sell an owner's policy after closing. And that's why we need to get that information understood at the closing table. And if they ask at the closing table how much that is, we'll give them a quote. That's not a problem. But if we go 2 or 3 days later and they say, I've changed my mind, sorry, it's too late. Because they want that going in at the same time. In theory, something could have happened to reveal a defect between the date of closing and the next day. And now they're trying to cover it. And that's what the title insurance company's position is. No, they had the opportunity at the time we say they had it. So that's when the risk attaches.
Any questions on this?
And there is a difference between owners and lenders. Everybody understands that, right? Lenders is good for the life of the loan and only goes to the lender. Owners is for the full time that the owner owns the property, and it's for all that time frame and basically up to the sometimes fair cash value or whatever they have paid for, depending whichever is lower. So.
Okay, number 10, prorations. I don't think we changed this at all. Rents, interest, and other expenses of the property, if any, are to be prorated as of the date of closing. Security deposits or advance rents, if any, will be credited to buyer as of the date of closing. All real estate ad valorem taxes due and payable during the year of closing will be prorated on a calendar year basis. In the event ad valorem taxes for the year of closing are unavailable or unascertainable, the ad valorem rate for the preceding year and present year assessment will be considered as a base for proration. Is there anything, Warren, there?
Not that I'm aware.
I don't think.
What you're going to get into in some of these, I'll give you a little tip. When you start selling parts of property, farms that have never been separated out, especially right at the taxable time, it's hard to get it separated sometimes, so you have to sometimes do it by acreage. If you can do that. If both parties agree to it, sometimes we've divided it by acreage, where they've sorted it out.
Good meet in the middle.
Yeah, meet in the middle type thing. So it can be worked out if it's an insistent thing. Sometimes it's low enough that the seller will pay it all. You need to make sure that's the understanding.
Right.
Sometimes it's not. You've got to figure some ingenious way of making everybody somewhat feel like they've won. That's what happens.
Okay, number 11, closing. This transaction will close on or before the date that you write in there. In the event this transaction has failed to close on or before the date set forth for any reason other than default by seller, seller has the right to terminate the contract by giving written notice to buyer and seek all available remedies. 2 points here. If one party wants to close sooner, all parties have to agree.
Correct.
And sometimes they just think they can willy-nilly close it. And usually if it's vacant, your seller is tickle pink to do that anyway. But make sure you get written confirmation if you're going to change that. I would like to ask Warren here, because it comes up, we're almost to the closing and the lender says, I need another week, or I need another 2 weeks, or this has come up. and the seller goes, nope, I want out right now. And yet up to that time, everything has moved, chugging along like the old choo-choo train. We do not have time is of the essence in here, and I'm wondering, should that go to court? How would that be looked at?
I think if the buyer is making every reasonable effort to get to the closing table, and that it's circumstances to which they have not contributed to make it to go beyond that time frame, and it's going to happen within a reasonable period of time. That's why lawyers like to talk about reasonableness, because then a court's probably going to say, what's the problem? Wait a week, close it, you get your money. You put time is of the essence. This was the argument against time of the essence.
Right.
Because if you make time is of the essence, now you put the lender on notice, you put the buyer on notice that if it doesn't happen on a certain date or date certain, you can make it drop dead right there. And everybody gets their money back, or they lose their money, or whatever it is. Contract terminates upon proper notice. Is that good? Probably not. Matter of fact, I don't recommend that even if time is of the essence is in there. I always try to get the parties to agree to an extension, because it's not in anybody's best efforts to close this out. Everybody's gotten too close to the closing date to say foul, unless there's some material misrepresentation or there's some dilatory activity on the buyer's part. They just waited till the day before to qualify for a loan, something like that. And there you still get into reasonableness. Let's say they don't apply for a loan until the day before closing date here. Well, obviously, you're going to have, 4 to 6 weeks, Ashley, to process? I don't think a court's going to consider that reasonable. Not because the bank has to take that long, it's because the buyer waited too long. Okay, so it's not going to be the bank's fault on that, but it's going to be a situation that is part of evidentiary discovery. Now, obviously, to get that done, you are in a lawsuit situation. How many of you think that your buyers or seller wins in that situation? No. Who all gets mad at each other? Everybody. Who wins? Lawyers. We still get paid if it happens or not, say, in that situation. And I don't say that to make a joke necessarily, but all you've done is create a scenario now that the closing can occur later than the 4 to 6 weeks it takes to process the loan. Because I can tell you right now, if I file a lawsuit on something, nothing's going to happen for 20 days. Guaranteed. Nothing. Because that's the time frame that the defendant, the breaching party, has to answer or respond to the lawsuit. Now, you have discovery. How long does that go on? Well, it depends who's trying to get out of the contract. I can make it go on for 2 years if I'm wanting to drag it out.
And their house is still sitting there.
House is still sitting there because now you've filed a lis pendens notice and the whole world knows there's litigation that's involved in the sale of that property.
I say this and brought this up because we have this, and you have sellers that go, I'm tired, I don't want to extend it. Use these words so that they understand why it's in their best interest. Now, I understand if it goes 2 months long, okay, there's a problem. That's no longer reasonable.
Right.
But if it is reasonable, we can help smooth things over and get us all to a closing. Right. And that's the big thing here.
Right.
Do you have a question? No? Anybody? Okay. Possession. And I look at this and I smile because I remember when I came here in 1992 and we still had 30 days day of deed. And we have slowly dragged our way out of that. It has taken probably 10 years back that we finally got through it into a healthy place. And thank goodness we're here. Okay, let's hit this one. Seller will deliver possession to buyer at closing unless otherwise agreed to in writing. And this talks about the pre-closing, post-closing occupancy agreement or an extension signed, attached to, and made part of this contract. Insurance is to be continued by seller until deed is passed, at which time the buyer will have full insurance coverage. Until possession is delivered, seller will maintain the property, exterior and interior, in the same or better condition as of the date of acceptance of this contract. Normal wear and tear expected. Seller will leave the property, including outbuildings, in broom clean condition and free of debris or personal property not listed in paragraph 4. Buyer will have the right to perform a walk-through inspection prior to closing and again prior to possession if you are using a post-occupancy agreement to verify condition. And in that case, the paragraph would survive the closing because it would go after the closing. Any questions on that? Anything from you?
Yes, ma'am.
I kind of have a comment. I mean, we, not about the number 12, but we insert in there agreed upon in writing pre-closing occupancy agreement or extension. I mean, we note that, but several times in the contract we say that escrow money can be, or earnest money can be returned to buyer. Is it more of with the mutual agreement, is it more of an issue with the brokerage to make sure that that mutual agreement is signed for escrow to get back?
What do you mean by the escrow gets back to the buyer?
Several times throughout it says return to buyer, return to buyer.
Oh, in case earnest money. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure I understand
Number
what.
12 was just an example of how you guys put in there having in writing a pre-occupancy agreement.
Yeah.
But nowhere does it state that the a mutual release needs to be signed to return that back to the buyer. So my question is that more of an issue on the brokerage side?
But it's at the beginning of this
Right.
where we talk about that. And with if you don't get a post-closing or pre-closing agreement, are we going to be having a termination of this contract at that time? So then we go back to who gets the escrow, and that's going to be the selection process by the brokerage then at that point.
Okay.
That's how I would handle that, if that's answering your question.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It's not pre-occupancy, post-occupancy is more of an agreement in between
Right.
the buyer and seller.
Right. The
Taking care of returning the escrow is more of an issue with policies
the termination of the
within
contract.
brokerage.
Correct.
I would say if the conditions are agreed upon, maybe she's saying, maybe I'm interpreting it differently. Conditions are agreed upon, the check will be written, returning to the buyer. You'd give it to them that day, you wouldn't wait 3 weeks to give it to them. Is that what you're talking about? They get it immediately, if everything's signed, that they're to give their check back, then the...
Yeah, then they get their escrow funds back or their deposit. Right. But I think what we're talking about on a pre-closing or post-closing occupancy agreement is we try to address, if you've read those and look at them, there's a lot of things. I don't agree that people should preoccupy a residence because I think that gives them a free latitude to find all the things wrong with it and tell you they're not going to buy it. That's just me, because I hear that when it comes, I've got this contract, and I've been living there for 30 days, and I don't like how this light switch works. Well, how can I get out of the contract? That's the question posed. And with this, there's an understanding or an agreement what's going to happen. The other issue comes up, well, what if during the pre-closing agreement that the buyer can't obtain financing and they have to back out of the contract? What about the damage that's been occurring all during this time that the 2 dogs decide to chew on the door frame or the door or whatever? Who pays for that? What happens? If it goes beyond a certain period of time, I think there's some language in there that they pay rent even. So that's what I view as being important. It's the unwritten things that cause litigation. The written things are meant to be clarifications and understandings. And that's what we're hoping to avoid by doing these 2 type of agreements. And so maybe that helps.
Thank goodness, I have never had this situation happen, but I have heard horror stories from other people. They go to closing, and guess what? The sellers haven't moved out.
Oh,
So in my mind,
that's happened recently.
You know what? If I
Even.
sign that deed, I get everything that's in that house. I mean, is that wrong?
No, you don't get everything in the house.
Yeah, but I told them that. So
She scares them.
Okay. Everybody understands?
Thank goodness. I mean, I've never had that.
Gail threatens
Some
her
of
clients.
you
Do we
guys
see that?
Horror story.
No, it's a good idea to emphasize to them whatever makes an impression with them, that you need to be out of that house and all your belongings are out. But we had a situation not long ago where they did their final walkthrough, and guess what? They haven't even brought the boxes in to
Start packing?
They haven't even brought the boxes in to move. What do you do?
Eviction notice.
I mean, what do you do?
Well, technically, once you close, you have to give an eviction notice. Who said that?
I did.
Good.
I had that happen.
Yeah, you have to do an eviction notice, and then they have 30 days after that. That's how the 30-day time frame got started in these contracts. So you have closing, you give them 30 days because the district court rules are, and the state rules are, people must have 30 days prior written notice before you begin an eviction.
Even though they've agreed to be out prior to.
That's correct. Now, what I have done and what I think the pre-closing, post-closing agreement is, I think I've added language in there, and I'll look if you want me to again, to say that by signing this notice, you have acknowledged you have received and waived your 30-day right to notification for eviction. So I start the process once they violate the post-closing or pre-closing agreement.
But I'm saying they haven't signed, there is no pre-closing or post-closing.
Now you got a problem.
Understanding
Yeah.
is literally up until the day before closing.
Right.
It's going to be empty.
Then the only other remedy is to give the 30 days notice after you close to get them out. And then you have your buyers that want to be somewhat cooperative. They don't want to make them mad. Why is that?
They'll ruin the house.
We don't want to damage the house. Or we don't want to come back 30 days later. The dogs have been locked in there for 2 weeks.
But the buyers have just moved out of their apartment.
Right.
Technically, let's say, you own the house, you've left the closing table.
Yeah.
And can you really, truly not have somebody come and move their stuff out?
No, ma'am.
You have to go through the eviction.
You have to go through the eviction process.
So because they would take one eviction.
Right.
They still
Because
So I guess the time to address that is doing a walkthrough. If you go there at 6 o'clock the night before closing, their
Right.
stuff is still in there.
Right.
We don't close.
Now there is something that can be addressed here with the contract through the walkthrough, because your contract gives your buyers an interest in the property. I've never done this, but this is a possibility. If you see that happening at your walkthrough, give them a 30 days eviction notice immediately, if you choose to do so. But now you're going to tick somebody off when you do that, so think about the consequences. But that could technically start your time running because there is an interest in property. No, but you own an interest in it by virtue of the contract.
Okay,
You already have somebody close.
Yeah.
You wouldn't close.
No, you still probably need to go in and close, knowing that that's in the process.
Yeah, and the seller, basically, they got by with it.
That's it. That's the other problem. Yes.
And you've written a post-closing occupancy agreement for us to use?
Mm-hmm.
We have,
allows
it's
for
a
rent
state
on a
form.
daily
It does.
basis.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
daily.
state form.
I say get that in there, make it about $1,000 a day.
Until they move
Until
out.
they-
You've got to be careful with that too.
Oh, really?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be reasonable, fair rental value.
Oh, darn. Oh, man.
Okay, Jeff?
We're talking about the buyer's interest, but the seller's interest we haven't discussed. And so if we're really going to say, okay, we're going to push all of our transactions to try to close in possession, then you're going to have to start looking at earnest money. I mean, I cannot, in good faith, go to my seller and say, you got to be out of closing, and we got $500 for us.
Right.
Because I'm moved out. I'm not going to unpack for $500.
Right, understood.
I fully agree with that. I
So,
see the
I think
dilemma.
if we go and we do this, then
I don't know
it's
that.
gonna change how we do other things.
Yes.
I don't think you're
Revisit.
going to be able to modify it to make it work, because what we're talking about here is making people do what they've agreed to do.
Yes.
Now, you all know that that's why there's lawyers, because people do not do what they've agreed to do. And that's our job to force that issue. You all you can push it all you want to, but the only thing that really makes a difference is if you get a judgment against them or an order saying they have to do something. And I'm not promoting that, don't get me wrong, because once you start that process, you can chalk it up to 6 or 8 or 10 months down the road. Compromise, push. Try to give and take. I think y'all reached a settlement on yours to get them out. And did it work amicably after that?
Well, I won't say amicably, but it worked.
It worked, okay.
They left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you didn't have excessive damage or things like that, which could happen. And then you've got a whole greater issue. Yes, ma'am.
What are your thoughts, Warren, on timing of final walkthrough? Because there's really only one final walkthrough allowed.
I know.
I've heard people say, well, you wait until the very last minute, you know, what do you expect? Or, you know, if you
That's
schedule it days
a tough one.
ahead, people may not move out, so.
That's a tough one. I don't know that I have a good answer for that. I would like to think maybe 2 or 3 days maximum, maybe 4 before, because a lot of things can happen for time frames longer than that. You know, and even
Water
2 days
damage.
before. Water damage.
Yes.
And you don't see that.
Move their furniture and damage walls.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, they may move out the night before. I've had that at closing, where we were moving out until 3 o'clock in the morning, and we're closing the loan. I thought, what's the property look like? You know, and fortunately there was a walkthrough that morning, and everybody was somewhat okay with that, right?
Somewhat.
I'm not naming names, but everybody starts raising their hand almost when I start saying these things. But that's what you run into, and you've got to deal with that. You know, you got to sort of know who your parties are and know how to deal with them, I guess. That's the best I can tell you. I wish everybody did the same thing, but then
You know, Warren,
They don't.
isn't that where it's great that we all work together
Yeah.
and say, you know, we might have a problem, this is, how do you want to handle this? And work, and then we can go to our respective clients and say, you know, this
Got a
may be a
glitch.
little problem, but with this, you know, be a solution.
Sure.
But it is great because we all work together here.
Well, I can tell you this, that's a great approach, because most of the time what causes the issues will be the element of surprise. And the surprise is compounded by the shortness of time to get it resolved. If you see something beginning to develop, alert the other agent. Say, this is what we're talking about, this is what I've heard. Give them a heads up so they can start prepping their client. The possibilities. See if it works. You know, it may not. It may just tick everybody off. But I've always thought prior disclosure and upfront discussion tends to settle a lot of things. You're not settling anything when you go to court. You're just getting a judge to tell you what's going to happen. Keep that in mind. Basically. You still have an angry client. You all are still fighting with each other. And whatever else is happening is going to happen. Okay?
Okay, let's go on to number 13, risk of loss or damage. All risk of loss or damage to the property by fire, windstorm, casualty, or other causes will remain with the seller until closing. If the property is damaged by any of the aforementioned, this contract will be null and void at the option of the buyer, and the earnest money returned to the buyer. Nothing changed there. Easy peasy. Okay, 14, representation. The parties further agree that neither real estate licensee nor any other person other than seller has made any representation as to the nature or condition of the property or any part thereof, nor to the fixtures, appliances, appurtenances, or amenities. The parties take responsibility for determining that all conditions and facts pertinent and material to this transaction have been addressed by the contract or have been made condition to its performance, i.e. through the repairs that we've done. And of course, that is our protection there and our liability. Any questions or comments?
We've tried to develop a paragraph that said, oh, you didn't tell me this. You know, and don't know if it's going to work. Can't promise you that. But at least I can ask someone, said, did you read this paragraph when your realtor was representing you? Yes, what do you think that meant? When it says that it's your responsibility, seller, to tell someone the basement's leaking. Why is it not on your seller disclosure form? Had this case happen, I know y'all get tired of my stories. Basement, house was sold. It was sold early spring or middle spring, something like that. We had a drought that year. It didn't rain until September. So 4 months passed. And then when it finally rained in September, we got a deluge. Well, guess what? The basement leaked. Oh, they were furious and wanted to sue everybody because it wasn't listed on the seller disclosure form. Now, there were some little things that should have been checked off on that because there was a second subfloor in the bathroom downstairs that was covering a drain. There was a fireplace downstairs and on the level walk-in floor. And we thought some of the water came from that. But what was even more impressive was that they had painted the walls with kilns. should have tipped somebody off, possibly. So these are things that you might want, if you're representing the buyer, to say, this is a beautiful basement, but keep in mind, we have to rely on the representations. You may want to ask them, has the basement ever leaked again? Just to see, or send that question across. Because they may check no, because it hasn't leaked since they put stay dry on the walls. Does that mean it's fixed? We don't know, see. So you get into some issues there.
I have a big concern, and we often address this with each other. When a property is being listed and the seller says, never lived in the house, bought it and rented it, well, they should know something. And you get them, and as Virginia Lawson has said, don't ever accept that. They put a big X on a disclosure form. I won't let them do that. They could put something on there.
Yeah, they should know something about the house because they've obviously been in it.
Or if one person said, I haven't lived at this is my parents' home, I haven't lived here since college. And the neighbor said, well, he ought to know that he's been over there having sweet water out of the basement when he's on spring vacation.
Oh, yeah.
Wasn't on there. So those kind of things, I think as agents, we've got a responsibility not to accept a disclosure form with a big X on it. Because that puts a liability on us too, I think.
It does, or it can at least involve you in something. The other question that you run into is see, there's no requirement to do a disclosure form on commercial property.
Correct.
What you run into is some landlords are counting their residential rentals as commercial property. So they think they don't have to give a disclosure form for that.
But if they know something, that's withholding.
Maybe, but see, I don't know that you're going to have the legal argument to back you up on that because it's their commercial property. I would like to see the statute changed such that if it's commercial residential, that they still have to give some form of disclosure. It may not be the same disclosure, but it would be good that if you had knowledge of a known leak or a known defect, that at least be disclosed, But, that's with the legislature.
Do you agree or disagree on this? She said, don't ever take a big X and have us.
Well, I would agree not to take that, but I know a lot of folks that maybe that's a true statement, that it's been 2 years since they've been in that rental. Because what they do, they hire someone to go make the repairs. And so they're actually telling you a truth.
Or it's an error and they live in California.
Yeah. So you can't just say, I don't know that I fully agree with her saying you can't accept an X.
Yeah, well, she was just emphatic about that.
Well, I know. And I think what she's telling you with that is get everything you can out of it. Yeah. If you can't
force someone to do something or not do it.
No, and that's right. But even at that, there's certain things that if they're that big of a deal, your walkthrough, you're showing it should pop up, or a home inspection should find it.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go on to 15. Enforcement and cost of litigation. Should it become necessary to institute litigation to enforce this contract, the prevailing party will be entitled to recover costs, including reasonable attorney fees from the non-prevailing party. There's that reasonable you like so much.
I love that one.
Okay. Number 16.
Reasonable attorney's fees, I'll address that. That's what the court tells you they think are reasonable. You put it in there. If y'all are negotiating a settlement and an attorney says my fee is $5,000, you have to look at it and see what did the lawyer really do. And then if they're not backing off of that, you may be required to hire an attorney for your client, or your client hire another attorney to start bucking that a little bit. Most attorneys charge by the hour. Most of us, whatever you pay us, it's too much, I'm sure. But, you've got to know that an attorney in Lexington or Louisville is going to charge you $400 and $500 an hour, as opposed to what most of us charge here, which is much less than that. So, if they hire someone that's in Lexington or Louisville, and then they say, I'm not paying that attorney's fee, it's way too high. Well, it's not for that area. Everybody, I know. My son charged twice as what I charge, and I'm still trying to get my money back.
Okay, let's go on to 16. This is the one place in our forms that you can write something, and Virginia Lawson and Warren and I talked about this. This is where she said, please do not restate what you've already seen written in here. It's redundancy. What do you think about that, Warren?
Redundancy is dangerous because if you don't completely copy what is stated in this agreement, you've modified a paragraph. The interpretation could be different if you rephrase it differently. And then there's two rules of thought on that. Well, if it wasn't important, why didn't you put it in there to begin with? And the other one is, well, you obviously listed it, so obviously you try to change something. So what is it that's changed since you have restated it? Now you got to tell the court, why did you do that? That sounds silly in a court of law when you're being questioned, because now you're saying, wasn't that true on page 1? Yes. Why didn't you put it on page 16 also? What did you intend to change? Nothing. Well, don't you think that's the intent? Is it says additional terms? So what was meant to be added to? What you have actually done now is created a scenario for the defendant in the case to say, yeah, that's why it was in there, because we meant to change it and they didn't fill it out correctly. See?
And the ones we usually see in here is it has to appraise. That's it in our offer. You can take them back and show them that. If they said, if it's not a satisfactory inspection, I want my money back, take them to that, show them that. There's no reason we have to keep seeing those phrases pop up. It's going to save you the writing of it because it's already in here. So I think it's going to work out a lot better. Any other questions on section 16? Okay. 17, we used to put addendums there. Warren suggested, rightfully so, that we change that word to attachments. And I'll let you tell why.
Basically, an attachment is going to be a separate document. Okay? And when you do an addendum, you're modifying something over here which is actually taken care of probably in that last section we just covered. So now you're going to start confusing people. So what I recommend is put attachments here, and then whatever those separate things are, like post-closing or pre-closing occupancy agreements, then you attach those. It says they're also incorporated by reference as if fully stated herein. And so now you've added more to it by changing that attachment and added the attachment. So it's just probably a play on words to a lot of degrees, but it tells you it's something different than what you're modifying the paragraph in here. Yes,
By
ma'am.
stating it as an attachment, again, going back to the personal property and the fact that we try to write a bill of sale for personal property, that would be attached to this. But would it confuse the bankers and things like that as part of it?
Yes, it would.
By having
With a
it,
personal
yes.
property, I think there needs to be a separate personal property agreement. That way it's not attached to this.
But attached to this might be a home sale contingency.
Right. If it's more detailed than what you've got in this agreement.
Thank you.
Okay.
Wait a minute, we've got another question.
I'm sorry.
So in the example of pre-closing occupancy agreement, if we do enter into one of those and we didn't know it at the time the contract was being written, do we have to have verbiage somewhere that says that paragraph is amended to include this?
Well, it would be just write it in here on this attachment.
Right.
Like,
And then get it initialed.
attachments, and you put post-closing agreement or pre-closing agreement. On this section 17, you just go back.
Already executed.
You've already
Yeah.
executed it.
Well, before you signed it, then you can say, write it in there, date and time when you wrote it in there, and that becomes a part of the agreement then.
Okay.
And this is one reason, too.
Or do a counteroffer, either one.
That at the bottom we always put page blank of blank. Don't fill that out until you have a full contract, till it's executed, because you may start with 4 and end up with 14.
Right.
Exactly.
So leave that blank, and then on the last signature, then you go back and number your pages to make them appropriate. Okay.
And back to the counteroffer on the post-closing agreement, that's one other way of doing that. But if everybody's agreed to it, that would be a way to circumvent doing a counteroffer, is just writing in both the initial and agreeing that it's incorporated, because that's what you do by that. Okay, but otherwise you can do the counteroffer and attach that, and then that fills it in.
And that's
Sometimes it didn't come up till like
Way down.
Way down.
That's right. And sometimes, right.
Come early.
Right. And that's why you have an attachment, because you've got a separate agreement now that you want to be incorporated into this.
Then you jot it time and date.
Time and date.
That indicates it. Okay,
Right.
got it. What if it's a pre-qualification letter when you're initiating the offer? Would you
You can do that too.
can do that too?
Yes. Make that an attachment.
Of course, that's not between the parties. That's from
No,
a bank.
but it's a notice thing.
Right.
But I mean, it's not going. But it's incorporating that they've already been approved by the
Right.
bank.
Yeah, that it's been sent.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on to 18, and this, of course, is where we give the time limit for a response. That has not changed, and that's as it used to be. I guess I want to ask Warren, let's say that the buyer gives us until 5 o'clock tomorrow. The selling agent gets a call that night, and the buyer says, I got cold feet, I don't want it. Or I found another house for sale by owner down the street and I want that one. What would be the appropriate way to cancel this offer?
You do a notice of cancellation of the offer.
By email, by phone, by fax, by...
I do it by the quickest means available and follow it up by mail. Because it takes effect, the cancellation takes effect when they receive it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. I would actually email, I do all the above.
All the above.
Call, and then note it in your file. When you emailed, print that off. When you called, what time, what you said, and then follow it up with a written notification.
Is that just saying that I hereby rescind the offer at
Yes.
a certain time? And that's okay, like in an email, it doesn't have to be on like a contract? Yes.
But it needs to be signed by your clients.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It would be a good idea. I think you could do it on their behalf.
Well, for your records.
But for your records and stuff, at least get something in there saying that that's what they want to do.
And wouldn't that be best to have them email you that too?
What?
I mean, like if they call you,
Your clients?
Yeah,
Highly recommend that.
because otherwise you don't have a paper trail.
That's exactly right. If they're telling you verbally, have them write it out. Give it to you, mail it to you, email it to you, whatever. Because if you don't have that and then it falls through and they found out they could have sold it and made $10,000, they're going to know why you did that.
If the seller accepts the offer after the time is expired, then what initials and stuff are required from the buyer?
In other words, it's like we give until 5 o'clock. The seller doesn't sign it till 6:30.
Well, then basically the offer is terminated.
Right, but if, I mean,
You need to get clarification from the buyer or whoever it is at that time, the seller, that they still wish to enforce the terms and conditions of the first proposed contract. Get that in writing from them.
Can we simply do a strike through on that times of the essence, have the seller change that time, initial it, and if the buyer agrees, he can initial that change as well on that?
If you time and initial it, I think you're going to be okay. But if you fail to do that, how are you going to prove when that occurred?
No, I'm saying do the strike through on the 5 p.m. We change it to 6:30.
Right.
And had the seller initial it, and then the buyer agrees.
Initial
was 6:30.
Initial in time when they initialed it.
It shows that both parties were.
that's what I was getting at.
But he's having the seller do it as opposed to the buyer. And so the seller's forcing the buyer to say, well, if you want to go ahead through with this, so it's not being initiated by the buyer.
No, I think there's two different questions here. But Mark, I think, asked the buyer accepted it past the time frame.
No, the seller.
No,
The seller accepted the offer, but basically the offer expired.
Expired an hour.
He was supposed
Maybe I
to.
misunderstood
Yeah,
what was
he
happening.
was supposed to
Okay.
respond by 5.
The seller
Did not sign it
initiates
prior
the.
to that.
Okay, so the buyer makes the offer. The seller
Goes over the
goes
time
over the
period.
time limit.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, misunderstood what you were saying.
Does that create a counteroffer?
It does create a counteroffer.
Well, no, your offer died.
No, it dies, but it creates a counteroffer. It's the same effect as the counteroffer.
Only has to be responded in time.
No, counteroffers revoke offers. So, if you, either way, it's revoked.
Jeff?
My question is, to save time and effort, can we have the seller do a strike through on that 5 p.m., change it to 6:30, initial date and time?
And then have the buyer agree to it?
Initial date and time, that change
And
as
then you
well.
got an agreement.
What if they don't?
Then it's dead.
Seller does it.
But how do you know that occurred is what I'm trying to get you to understand. How do you know the buyer did not? You're going to draw buyer's lines and initial lines for
I'm
the
just
buyer?
like the buyer, the initial, where that strike through was, and date and time as
Yeah,
well.
I think
If they don't, then we.
that's an easier way of doing it. Probably a more correct way of doing it is to do the counteroffer, because now you've got everybody on the same page signing after the date and time. Not saying that the agreement's going to go away. What you're going to say is that it failed to meet the requirement of time, and therefore this is the counteroffer. You've got that, and you've got a logical sequence of what's going on. If you start initialing and someone fails to initial and you're in a lawsuit, you may have a difficulty getting your buyer to say, no, I would have initialed it, I just didn't know about it, or no, I didn't do it.
It was that way.
What's that?
To me, it was
There's a lot of loopholes there. Huh?
Okay, so the buyer makes an offer and the response time is 5 o'clock p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say 8 o'clock p.m., the seller decides he'll accept it,
Yeah.
but the offer's already dead. And why are you saying he could counter? He's already missed.
No. The seller could say, I wish to submit this again as a counteroffer because the seller can't. No, the seller.
Because he's responding.
He's responding saying, I agree with what you've presented to me as the agreement, or I disagree with it. But if he says, I'm willing to do this, the time limit has lapsed. The buyer then, if the seller accepts it at 8 o'clock, the buyer can say, it's too late, I'm not buying it.
Right, he could have made an offer on some of it.
That's correct. So now it becomes a counteroffer because it died at the time frame that it should have occurred.
You didn't have an offer, you didn't have anything, he signed.
That's right, there's nothing there.
So you're saying the counteroffer can be freestanding after the time frame.
That's right, because you're trying to correct the time frame of acceptance. Yes.
Now, we counter to an expired offer, though, I think is what we're all
Well,
trying to
what you're trying to determine is, okay, you send back into a counter saying, I recognize I'm beyond the time frame for accepting your offer. Here's why I did not respond. I didn't just ignore it, I couldn't, I didn't know about it. Please accept this as my counter accepting it. Yes.
And I think too, we're getting hung up on the word counter and offer.
Yeah.
What they're doing is giving a new offer back, is what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's a brand new offer.
And that's sort of what you're doing,
Yeah.
but you call it counter because it's afterwards. But yes, any offer made, it can terminate by time frame or it can terminate by counter offer. Every counter offer will terminate an offer by law unless you create the conditions that will remain and you submit those back. And that's why I'm saying it's a little more clear to do it the other direction. It may still bind the contract if you've got parties willing to admit what's occurred. If they do.
But there, it could be challenging, they could not, they could
Right.
challenge it if they had a reason, they could take
Correct.
advantage of
But
that.
if I'm right, a lot of times if I'm writing an offer, say if I'm writing an offer to Rebecca, I don't know the circumstances of her seller.
Right.
And I put in the time, but Rebecca will call me and say, hey, my client's out of town, we're gonna need more time. Then we can do it just like Jeff said, mark it out.
Perfect. That's a
and give
perfect
it time.
scenario on that one.
The
Yes.
seller ought to know if their client's gonna be able to make this deadline.
Mhm.
And, and then you
Yeah.
can avoid all that
Right, but I was taking the scenario where nobody communicated and the time died.
Well, hopefully we don't have.
Yeah, but if you've got that communication going on, I think you can probably modify it like that and be okay. You just need to make sure your buyers and sellers are fully aware of what's happening and date and time everything.
But you could put an acceptance time and date on there, but like Freddie Mac could accept it 10 days later.
Yeah,
But you got to be able to document that somehow.
right, right.
Well, while we're all here together too, I mean, an offer expires and your seller intentionally is not responding because they don't want to and they don't want to hassle with it. It's so frustrating to me to have agents call and say, could you get that signed? No, they don't want to. No, the offer's dead. Don't call me again. Don't ask me for that because we're not going to get it for you. So that's really frustrating in this big forum here that, I mean, if an offer dies, it dies.
It dies.
And it's intentional, usually from the seller's standpoint.
Right.
Sometimes in defense of that agent, and I'm not an agent, it's restricted, I'm always thinking about that. How, and not that I don't trust another agent, but how am I going to tell the seller that that was actually presented in a timely basis? And you could say, your whatever.
I don't know that you'll ever know that it was presented in a timely
No,
basis.
and we'll never know that it was presented.
You just have to go. That's why timing and date and time and counteroffers are so important.
We get tired of it, but it's critical.
Yes, ma'am.
I had a situation where I'm trying to think, the buyer did not believe that the seller was presented with their offer and they wanted proof. So this rejection, the counter or the offer just died, and they said, what proof do we have that it was actually presented? And I hate to say that we were even unsure that it was.
I don't know that you can get that.
But you can present the offer.
Yeah, they did not allow that.
Yeah.
And so we didn't have a guarantee.
I mean, that is a requirement that you're to present all offers to your clients.
You can, we don't do it here often. If it was with someone, certainly not in our board, because we wouldn't do that, but if it was with an agent you feared that to be true, you could ask to be present and present your own offer.
Yeah, I did, and it was not in our board, and we were refused for me to present the offer, to be there at the presentation of the offer, and my buyer happened to be a real estate agent and wanted to make sure that the offer was received. So, I mean, that's why we requested that they signed that it was rejected.
Yeah, and if you do, that's all you can do. I don't think you can go any further with that.
No. You've tried. Okay. Acknowledgements is the next part. This is just where we put the buyers on notice that they have full rights before they sign this to seek legal counsel. And you may encourage them, of course, to do that. You are telling them that there's no terms not contained herein and deemed material or pertinent to the contract, and no verbal agreements or understandings of any kind not contained herein will be binding upon the parties. All parties can have an attorney's help if they so choose. And this is where you will explain to them, especially if they're new buyers, guys, this is a contract negotiation. It's not a contract yet, but you know if they do sign this and accept, you are legally bound by this. So many younger people sometimes just think it's like they can just say, I don't want in now. So this is the place to talk to them about that. And again, what Warren talked about the initials or what's on the license.
Right.
For the signatures. It is given over then, just like before. The seller can accept, reject, or reject and counter. And if they do counter, then we go on to our other counter offer forms that we'll talk about after the next break. Beth.
Okay, what's the proper method for dealing with the earnest money signature by the agent? A lot of us deal with people out of the area who will mail that into us. We don't write our names here.
We have earnest money received by, sometimes you can't sign it because it's not there yet.
Can we go back, or should we go back after receipt and modify this page?
I think you need to acknowledge when you got it and date and time it, because technically you don't have a contract until you've got that earnest money deposit.
So we need to go ahead, let's just say that I'm cooperating with Tammy and I don't get my earnest money from my guy until Tuesday.
You need to let her know that.
Well, oh yeah, she will, that's certainly done.
It's within the
after
time
I
period.
receive it, I need to sign this and then get her a copy of this page.
Right.
Okay.
Date and
That's
time.
always been a question in my mind.
Usually it's blank.
Yeah.
Unless they're actually holding it.
Next question. So when you sign that, if you're signing it at a later date, do your buyers and sellers have to go back and sign it because you're changing a contract that's been signed?
Yes.
Be a good idea to get them at least to initial it and okay it. Now, there's another way of doing that. If you don't want to get them to do that, we need to draft a form of acknowledgement saying in that line that you will provide by separate letter or by separate notification when you receive the earnest money deposit.
Okay, and you're drawing up that that paragraph for us, right?
I can if you want me to. I haven't been asked to do that. But see, then you can put in that line at the time of contract, will provide when received or shall be provided within 10 days or something like that.
I think that would be a cleaner way to do that.
I put it on line 16 again a lot of times.
Yeah.
They're gonna mail it in.
Right.
Yeah.
Earnest money will be mailed within 3 days of contract acceptance. Right.
Yeah.
But it's not accepted.
It's not when it's mailed, Gail. It's when you receive it.
You don't have a contract.
Yeah, you don't have a. That's right.
That's where I'm good, yeah.
Yeah, but you need to probably have something in that section we were talking about to say that we're going to have it received by a certain date or this contract is void.
Got a question.
That happened with the ICE. People couldn't get here. And
Yeah.
the agent, we know that things recorded back for
Right.
reasons.
Tina.
You were in Virginia's class when I specifically asked if we write in a contract that the earnest deposit will be received 5 days after, or whatever, if it's not deposited in 72 hours, it doesn't matter what we write in the contract. That's still
That's-
violating license law.
You're right. Now, I forgot about that. I'm sorry to give you the time frame on that. You really don't need to be doing that. That's right. You're correct.
That you have a disputable,
Yeah.
you know, whatever.
I had forgotten that there was that 72
But
hour.
it's still against license law if it's not in there in 72 hours.
Right.
No matter.
No matter what it
how many times
says.
you've written on there.
Yeah.
That it's not coming in.
And if you are the buyer's agent and it within those 72 hours or soon thereafter, if you do not receive that money, and maybe it becomes further along, several days, you have the obligation to call very quickly the listing agent and alert them that you are not holding that. And then you can tell about why it's not here. There's an ice storm, I don't know what it is, but you must let them know or you will be liable for that.
I have a question. If I'm correct, tell me so, if not, you will. On an earnest, someone says, I'm not putting any earnest money down. We can't refuse to write an offer.
No.
No, you can't.
And if they put 0 down, and then they, because of the situation, knowing they couldn't get it here, and that we could deposit it accordingly, we'd have 0. If they choose, can we amend the contract when we were able to get an earnest deposit, amend it and get signatures for everyone? They've
Yes.
chosen to
To
do that
do
as a
it.
caution. I mean,
You can do that later.
Write the contract saying that there's no earnest deposit if you don't have it in your hand.
Right.
Yeah.
Then to trust you're going to get it.
Yeah, you can amend it.
0.
You can amend it when you get it.
But explain to them the reason.
There are other, Texas has that in theirs. They say earnest money to be if it's $500 or if you put 0. And maybe the seller really wanted $2,000. And the next line says, the next earnest money will be received by. So you've done your duty by your law, by your code, and then in 2 weeks you get the rest of it. And it's told when it will be there, and then you'd have to
As long
alert.
as it's
Yes.
keeping down.
And then you get a receipt saying that you have it.
Right.
But
Then everyone must initial.
if you better say 0.
If you make it part of this, it does.
And make that attachment, go back and initial it.
Right.
There you go. Okay.
Okay, last call for sales contract. Any questions? I'm sorry.
Paragraph 16.
What's that now?
Would you put, is that another earnest deposit?
I'd put it in section 16, wouldn't you?
16.
Because that's where we go.
Yeah, and we're gonna modify this.
Guys, one
to,
more second,
I think,
Jeff.
72
Sorry,
hours on
just for
that.
clarification on that. If the contract is written, the earnest money be deposited within 3 days,
Correct.
and we don't get it, the buyer's agent doesn't get it.
Right.
Does that automatically void that contract?
That would be up to your seller.
I think it's going to be an interesting. I think you have to write a new contract.
Or amended.
Or amended somehow.
Otherwise, by definition, the contract is
It's void. That's right.
Conditions
Yeah.
weren't there.
Right. Okay, we're going to take a break right now, and we're going to come back to lots and lands. It will be very brief because we paralleled sections for this reason when we redid it. So take 10 minutes and let's get back. All right, here we go, guys. I wish I could remember. I want to say maybe it was Brian. I can't remember when we were sitting in our MLS and we were going to redo the lots and lands. He said, you know what would be a really great idea when we have the same forms like purchase price or financing. Why don't we put the exact same words from the sales contract into lots and lands so you don't, it's familiar to you. And that is what we did. We paralleled as much as we could so it's going to be for easier reading. The top part is exactly the same as the other contract, so there's no reason to discuss it. Purchase price is the same. The only change in financing, if you will look in the 1, 2, 3, 4th line down, under all cash, it says buyer will or will not have an appraisal. Oftentimes we sell small lots for $1,300, and they probably will not have an appraisal on that. They're probably not getting a loan. So it'll just help us know what is going to be appraised and what isn't. That's really the only change in financing. Earnest money?
When the appraisal would be completed?
When you mean, could they?
I would hate for somebody to have a 30-day contract and not order an appraisal until the last minute.
She's saying what should we not find out when the appraisal is going to be completed so it's within the time frame?
Or at least when it's ordered by, within so many days.
I don't know, what do you
They
think?
could drag their feet with
No,
it.
no, first you want to set a number, no contract.
Right. The sales contract, we don't have
That's
it.
all part of the money.
I think it would probably flow with your lender, because the lender's not going to want to tarry on that.
Cash is not going to be.
Oh, that's true.
I would say that if the seller is concerned about it, have it as a counter.
You put it
Because
in,
that's part of your financing.
True.
No, it says cash.
you can put it in section 14,
Oh.
other terms and contingencies.
Okay. And that's a good thought.
Now, if it came to me, I'd recommend to my seller that we counter that the appraisal be done by such and such a date.
Right. Ordered by
And that would be a
certain
part
date.
of the contract at that point, if accepted.
Tina, that's good. Thank you. Earnest money, same thing as before. We don't need to go through that. Prorations, the same. I'm
We're
sorry.
going to change that.
We're going to make the same changes that we're doing on the
Yes,
other one.
we'll blanket it over. Risk of loss. All risk of loss remain with the seller until closing. Lots and land. I don't know what kind of loss we'd have. Maybe a grass fire and the trees are all gone.
Sinkhole.
Sinkhole. There you go. Okay. So,
Find woods and the trees get blown.
yes. I mean, things happen. Okay. Closing costs are the same. Again, we've got for cash transaction, the closing fee will be paid by buyer. The closing is the same. Again, like warrant did. We did the general warranty deed. If it's different, put that in writing. Possession, there's a blank. Inspections. On number 9, this contract is contingent upon inspection. Should the contract be terminated as a result of these inspections, the parties shall sign a mutual release of the contract and the earnest money will be returned to the buyer as provided in the KRS 324. Inspections may include but are not limited to the following: septic suitability test, water test, environmental test. Inspections shall be done within blank calendar days from the contract acceptance. If buyer fails to obtain inspections during this specific time, again, the buyer shall be deemed to have accepted the property in its present condition. So again, we have the calendar days for them to get that done. If they go past that, then their time is up unless it's agreed to in writing by all parties. Survey, if a survey shows encroachment on the property or that improvements located on the property encroach on setback lines, easements, land of others, or violate any restrictions, covenants, or applicable governmental regulation, and such condition cannot be remedied by seller prior to closing, buyer may terminate this contract by written notice to seller and earnest money will be refunded. And again, that is set up exactly like we did the other, and we've talked through that. Let's quickly look at usage number 11. I was going to ask Warren to talk about these if he felt the need. A is buyer to check with the appropriate governmental agency to determine driveway access is available to highway. Why is that important?
Because some places you cannot get a driveway permit, and you have to get it permitted by the state of Kentucky. And there's been a couple of occasions that people bought lots thinking they could put a building or a commercial structure on. That requires a different type of entrance, a commercial entrance, and it may not be allowed. So that's why that's in there.
And he's doing this so when your buyer says, why do I need this? You have this, if it pertains to them. B, buyer to ascertain that applicable zoning ordinances, restrictions, or governmental laws, rules, or regulations, and utilities are available for such intended use. Speaks to itself.
Yeah, it speaks to itself. Make sure you check with the governmental entity. And that's something you need. We didn't talk about it in the residential purchase contract, but we get into single-family dwellings and who can rent them and who can occupy them. If it's in a zone where it's only single-family dwellings and you've got a client that are going to put multi-people in there that are not related, they're going to be kicked out. They're going to require one person to be in there. So that needs to be something discussed between you and your purchaser on that quickly. Because if they're talking to you about maybe a rental situation, they need to know that certain zones will not allow that.
We had a big fight in Denton about that.
Yeah.
We had a big fight over in Murray, too, about that on 2 or 3 occasions.
And sometimes you tell them,
Yeah.
and they say, I don't care, get that in writing.
Yeah.
So when they come back and do get kicked out, they
Yeah.
don't come back to you, you have proof.
I'm not so sure there wasn't a federal case on that many years ago in Murray. And I think the ruling was that our zoning laws applied. So.
The zoning laws lost out because it came out fair housing issue.
Oh, really? Wow.
Federal fair housing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, C, buyer to check floodplain information as designated by the appropriate governmental authority. Again, if you're building,
If you're building in a floodplain or someone needs to know if it's in a floodplain, how many of you have had that experience where you sell a piece of property, think you've sold it, and then it comes back, the lender says, it's in a floodplain, or a 6-inch section is in a floodplain? Well, I guess the determination is at that point, all of it is potentially in the floodplain, so you have to purchase flood insurance. So now we get into how do we disclose that, how do we pay for that, do we terminate the contract, how does that work?
better to find out before rather than
Always better to find
after.
out before.
Okay. 12, warranty. Seller is not making any warranties or representations, either express or implied, except as contained herein. Buyer is accepting the property in as-is condition, except for contingencies or other terms and conditions set forth herein. As-is, you have any feelings on as-is?
I always like to think as-is is enforceable, meaning you buy what you're looking at, and you are responsible for, your buyer is responsible for getting all the inspections they need. And so unless you have some knowledge of known defects or your client does, then I think as-is should be enforceable. Where you get into a problem is if they can prove that your seller knew or should have known of a problem. Here's a good example. Someone's been cooking meth on the property, you know, and now it's listed or registered with the state of Kentucky as being a possible EPA site. Now you've got prior notice, and now that should be disclosed. That would be an exception to that.
Absolutely. Access, of course, the seller agrees to give full access for the use of inspections and or survey. 14 is like section 16 on the other. Again, write in what needs to be in there. Just don't keep restating the obvious. And we did change the word from addendums to attachments on this one as well. The bottom talks just like the acknowledgments on the other one that they have the right for legal counsel before they sign this. And the rest of this is exactly like the sales contract. So what we will have to do now is go back, and what we do to the sales contract, we'll lift and implement into this one so that they run the same. John?
Hey, Linda, going back to section 3, I think you said that was maybe supposed to be the exact same, but in the copy that I've got on the lots of land.
No, it's not. We're going to modify it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're going to modify it. That's
Okay.
correct. We had our discussion. It is the close to the same contract, so we're going to mirror the one that we're doing in the purchase contract.
Warren said there's no responsibility on the seller to disclose whether it's in a floodplain or not.
Sometimes they don't know.
On the buyer here, it looks like.
Yeah, if they know, they have a responsibility for doing that, but they may not know. I mean, there's several
It was
lots
redone.
in town. Huh?
It was redone several years ago,
and
too.
even when it's redone, they don't always get notice. They might be an absentee landlord or something like that, and they don't know it or don't realize what that's telling them.
The buyer can ask for the seller to verify whether it's in.
Right.
It's not mandated by the state, but the state does have, and I'm sure you've got them in your office, disclosures for raw land, vacant land. And I don't know, Phil, does it tell in there if it's in the floodplain?
It does, but that's not required.
No, it's not required. It's a nice thing to have because it talks about having toxic dumping. And I sure would like to be protected if they said no and it turned up yes. We had no knowledge of that. They're good to use if you can get the seller to fill them out.
That and in-ground tanks.
Yes.
That's another big issue. A lot of old farms, people used to have butane tanks. Most of us don't use that now. And, you'll be walking across and all of a sudden you'll find a little latch in the middle of the yard. What is that? It's an in-ground tank.
And cisterns that fall in.
That's right.
Yes.
This has nothing to do with the content, but are we going to mirror the font on these
I will talk to Twyla about that. She's saying okay.
Cheryl?
Is there a reason why usage B and C is not in our standard contract?
We just haven't thought of it. We just haven't discussed it. I mean, if
Well, that's a good question. Of course, if they're going to a lender, the floodplain issue will be settled.
Cash. And also on zoning, even though we advise them that it's a single family residence and they are going to use it for multiple family, would that protect us if we have asked them to check in?
I know in our office, we always do a separate paper that says we told them. Yes, and I'm wondering if that is somewhat covered under the last page of our sales contract, or this next to the last page where it talks about, let me see if I can find it.
Representation.
Yes, I think it.
Page 4, number 14.
And, well, it, I guess loosely falls under parties take responsibility for determining that all conditions and facts pertinent to this transaction have been addressed or have been made condition. Well, no, it wouldn't be there.
They can come back and say that we didn't tell them or it spelled it out.
Right. Okay, well, let's revisit that and see if we can find a
Maybe that will
place
be
to put that in. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. We don't know we need it until we need it. Yes, and then we wish it was there. There are 2 counteroffer forms. If you are representing, if your seller is making a counteroffer form, it's at the top. It says seller to buyer. Use that one. If you are countering and you are working with the buyer, use the one that says buyer to seller. They are exactly alike. They're just different. Where they sign it is labeled differently. That's the only thing. You have a place on there for your purchase price. And this is what you're countering back. It is understood with each change of purchase price, the additional cash at closing, the amount of financing, and the monthly payment of principal and interest will change. Buyers should confirm with their lenders. We have never done this, Warren, before. Go back and change all that in our financing. So we are at least making note here that that will change. And then any other changes or any other items on the counter would go underneath that. And these are exactly the same. Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't think about this when we were talking before. On the one buyer to seller, obviously buyer's the first line.
Yes.
On the one seller to buyer, why don't we flip-flop seller to buyer and
Okay.
put seller on top?
That's a good idea.
Otherwise, I'll pull the wrong form
Yes, yes.
every time.
Understood.
And I have a question on these counter offers. Should we, regardless, put the purchase price on there, whether or not the price is being countered? Let's say that they agree on the price, but they don't agree on some term. Do we need to put that original agreed on price in there?
No.
Because with it left blank, it looks as if something is missing.
only if you put 0 in there will you be changing the purchase price.
Okay.
What you want to put on that, if you want to avoid that confusion, is put not changed.
Thank you.
Okay, that's a good idea.
That way you don't get a confusion or interpretation issue.
It's okay to put the purchase price back in there.
If you want to, yeah, it's okay to do it, but if you just want to not address that, but not changed. Right, no change.
Any questions on these, on the counter? Yes, I'm Jeff.
I don't understand why we're not using the same information on the counter offers, on the earnest money and additional cash and the financing clause. If it's important enough to be in there the first time, this becomes our contract on the counter. And you're binding your buyer to that payment, which is not stated here.
I understand.
But if you're not changing it, why restate
The
it?
price changes, it changes. The financing.
If we counter.
Oh, if the price changes, I see what you're saying.
How would you?
We're talking about, we're buying into a percentage, we're buying to a monthly not to exceed. In my thinking is if it's required to be in there on 1 and 2, then that should also be required on the counter, because that is our contract.
Right, and I know you use that, and, because,
Wasn't some of the conversation about the fact that even though we put it on the initial offer, when they're really finalizing things with their bank, some of that changes anyway. The
But I
amount of
mean, I
down
agree with
payment
that.
and all of that kind of stuff. So I thought we were simply just, we thought we had
But you
addressed
could
that,
change
just
the-
to know that it could change. Or,
You could change the price and the rest of it may be agreeable. They just have to bring more money to closing too.
But shouldn't it be stated in the if it's required to be stated in our initial offer, it's not a contract, why would it not be required to be?
Well, you're
stated in the
restating what's
contract?
already agreed upon is basically what you're doing if the only thing changes the purchase price.
but it changes your monthly payment
but
that's on
you
there.
clearly see, you're acknowledging that in that sentence, don't you think?
It's saying buyers.
Well, you're not changing the monthly payment if they're not borrowing more money.
No, if let's just say it comes in at $100,000 and it's countered back at 120, and they accept 120, you've got $20,000 that's not accounted in here, because on the front page you've got.
Then you modify that.
But here's your statement says that.
But here's the thing,
No.
a counter offer can be different by thousands of dollars.
Okay.
Yes.
And if you make a counter, that can change their ability to qualify, to whether or not they have enough cash to.
So then you go down to other changes and write what those other changes are then. If that is going to be affecting
Well,
those.
we as agents don't always know.
So you're saying it would help you all to have all that extra stuff in there
I
so you
just
could
feel
do
like
that?
if it's-
And we did, that was in one of our
Yeah.
forms
Yeah, I
that
don't
we did.
object to it. I just
It
don't want to
does
get it.
change it right here. Did you read that part?
Yeah.
Change the purchase price and the amount of financing and monthly
It's
payment will
understood.
change.
Right, John?
Buyers will
So you
be
can scratch
first.
that information down for them on a piece of paper.
Where it gets really complicated is if you're a seller countering to a buyer's
Yes.
offer, and you're changing the purchase price by thousands of dollars, you don't know as a seller if they are bringing additional cash. The terms of the mortgage may stay the same and they just bring additional down payment, or the mortgage terms may change. How, as a seller, are you supposed to change the mortgage terms for the buyer on the counter?
And I think it's clearly covered under that statement that you know, everybody knows it's going to
And why
change.
change it?
I think so many, like at the very first one, they did 10% down. They may not be able to do 10% down in the counter.
True.
You know, on what the seller's pitching back to them. That, I think that was one of our,
Would this statement not wrap that up, saying you have that it will change, that says that. Buyers shall confirm with the lender. To me, a confirmation would be that the lender would approve it, whatever
Yeah,
that
I mean, I
change
think
is.
it's covered.
Now, maybe that's not clear enough to some people, but if they don't confirm it, it's not gonna happen.
no, of course.
Right.
And they would do that before they
The lender doesn't
accepted it.
confirm yes.
And so basically from what Jeff, you're saying is all that changes, and if we don't change everything else, then they could lock themselves into something that they can't do without modifying the other terms and conditions.
That's true. You could be binding your client into something that they can't do.
Yeah. And if you don't think about it by looking, at it, maybe when you put it in there, so they at least look at it and put no change on it.
But if the client can't do it, he gets the counter back, and he can't do it, he's gonna reject the counter or counter back.
Right, but I think what Jeff is saying, it may be,
The higher price and saying, well, it's this, they're not binding the seller to any of that thing because they've rejected the offer, but they're saying, we will do this. If the buyer can't do it, the buyer says, no, but I counter, or I'm walking away.
Right.
They're not binding the buyer.
Maybe it should be put in there when the buyer is sending something back.
I think you've
Not
covered
the
just
seller.
like you've got, I mean, I think you've covered the scenario here.
All right, we'll revisit this and,
The initial offer, it may change from how much cash you're gonna put down on the counter offer.
yes,
right,
of course.
right.
But if they're borrowing money, you guys all get tied to the lender. You know, like if their payment is going down, I'm gonna log in, it's gonna be put on finance. Because if the payment's gonna go so high, they're gonna be fine, it's gonna be put down because of the financing. I've never seen all those until.
Okay, All right, let's do this, guys. We'll talk about this.
Right.
And explore how we should do that.
Only thing I have to say about that is if you're if you're the listing agent, and you come back and you put those terms in there, and that buyer says, yes, but I've got more down payment money I can put with it, I don't want to borrow any more money, they can reject that and walk away. Just because of that little bitty part you put in there, not knowing what they can and cannot, or what they can or cannot do.
If they don't have a letter saying
I think it's getting too complicated.
I really think we just leave it like it is.
We were trying to avoid getting into their financing. That's what we were trying to do, because I think it's going to present a lot of issues if we're trying to match exactly what the bank is doing.
I think the main reason that's in there is to get multiple offers.
Right, I agree. Okay.
It must be in the contract. The state said.
Well, but it says not to exceed. You can put it in not to exceed so much %, not to exceed a certain amount of money you borrow. It can be less than all that and still close.
But if the counter is more, then it's going to exceed that payment. So therefore, by statute.
But I know, but if you put not to exceed the monthly payment, which may be higher than what they can actually agree upon, then you have the binding contract. The intent on that language is for it to have a cap, not to be exact. Is the way I'm looking at it. Because, and so if you put in there not to exceed when you're filling that out, then if they bring more money to closing, that's still okay. If they have to borrow more money and the monthly payment still doesn't exceed what they put in as their maximum, it's still okay because it didn't exceed that amount.
Most likely it will exceed because that payment.
Well, if it's going to exceed it, now obviously you've got to modify it.
In most cases, it's going.
What you're saying is
that number in, we're actually figuring the payment. We're not going above what that payment is. We're not adding extra money.
Yeah, but I think the intent was is to put a cap on what they could absolutely afford and nothing more than that.
You can buffer that. In other words, if I can afford $500 a month, but I find a house and the payment's only going to be $400 a month, we can still put $500 in there.
No one's doing it.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Fill that out.
You're filling out
You're
the
figuring out what the actual payment is.
Right.
No.
So there's not.
Guys, we've only got this room for a short period. I'm not trying to cut you off, Jeff. I appreciate that, and we'll talk about this. We had regional meeting yesterday. 2 things have come up that you're going to be seeing in Paragon. This is the best place for me to tell you that. Years ago, and you newer agents will not remember this time, and it is in our code, standard of practices 3-4. And it deals with having a variable rate commission. Often, and there's nothing wrong with this, you go out to take a listing. Maybe this is your sister. Maybe this is an investor you sold 5 houses to. And you write down on the listing, if I sell this, you will only be charged blank amount commission. If it goes into the MLS and an outside office sells it, it's going to be this commission. There's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly okay. What is wrong is when you do not explain to your cooperating brokers in the MLS that you have done this. We are adding this. You will see it. It's already in there. When you go in to put in a listing, it's line item 143. It's directly underneath where we put co-op broker, and you put the percentage of commission or the amount dollar-wise of commission, like for lots. Directly underneath that, it says variable rate, yes or no. If you have anything different, meaning a variable rate, you need to mark yes on that. This at least puts the other people on notice that there is, they're not playing on an equal playing field if you both bring in a $100,000 offer. Seller will probably take the one you're bringing because he's not paying as much commission. That cooperating broker has the right to ring, call you on the phone, and they have the right to ask you what is the difference between what I'm being offered and what you have agreed to. They have the right to know that before they make an offer. And this is in our code of ethics. We in regional are not making this a required field, because we feel like, because it is the code, it's up to every agent to do that because you have sworn your duty to be a realtor. So I encourage you, if you don't put anything there, it is going to be assumed that it is just a regular, no variable rate commission for you. So when you see that, please fill it in because it will protect you if there's ever an issue. Where does that come up? Possibly at the closing table.
I was going to say, if it's a variable rate issue, please notify the attorney that's closing the loan and tell them how that variable rate's going to be calculated, what you all have agreed to.
Right. Otherwise, you'll get there and have to change it.
That's exactly right. And then if we change that, it may have to be reapproved through the underwriter. That's the problem.
Okay, quickly, I want you to see that so that you'll know how to do it. The next thing we've talked about, and this has been going round and round. I know some of you have had dealings, closings, transactions with Paducah, and there are brokers over there. When they give the commission, they don't base it on the deed amount. They base it on the adjusted amount when they take away the concessions that were paid by the seller. They wanted it to be told in remarks this so that you knew when you got to the closing you would be getting a lesser commission than you thought. We batted this around. I know probably Warren's opinion on this, and I know we've said in seminars where it said don't do that, you have to base it on the deed amount. We went back to NAR, we went back to KAR, and basically they said that is a negotiable thing, broker to broker, as long as the cooperating broker knows of it before they write anything, then it's perfectly legal. You can do that. We just didn't like to be blindsided when you got to the table and your check came over and you looked at it and it was not what you anticipated it to be. So we have that. Did everybody get that paper outside? Did we not pass that?
You got one, didn't you, Daddy? I got one. That's what we're talking about.
Okay. When you go out, pick it up. We did a committee to come up with a way to do this in regional so that it seemed fair. This was brought to us yesterday, and this will be on a drop down. It's not there yet, but it will be. And it's going to be in that same vicinity where you put commission in. It's going to put, it will say number one, or A, I don't know how I'll do it, by showing percentage of gross selling. That is, of course, your percentage will be taken on what it's listed at or what it sells at. Or it will have a second box that says commission shall be reduced for seller concessions if indicated. If that is marked, then you will know that your commission will be reduced by that amount. It also will do the same thing under dollar amount. These are the terms that we gave so we all know what we're talking about, and this is going into our bylaws. Seller concessions, and this is the definition, items paid by seller on behalf of purchaser that are requested in the purchase contract. The maximum amount of these seller expenses concessions must be expressed in the initial accepted contract. In other words, you know when you receive something or when you give it that you're asking for $4,500 or $5,500 to go towards buyer's closing costs and prepaids. You will automatically know on that small portion you're not going to get a commission. This is the best way that we could come up with to be fair with everybody, and the main thing is full disclosure and transparency early on. So you will be seeing this in there. It was Phil was there, Brenda was there. We voted on this. It was not unanimous to do this. Some thought we're opening a can of worms. Why do I ask this? You need to know, in order to mark this when you list it, what you're going to do. So this will probably be a discussion you're going to have with your seller when you sit with them. Should we have seller concessions in an offer that you accept? And you know what the answer is going to be. Would you like us to take a full commission? Or do you want it on the adjusted after the concessions? You know what they're going to say. That's dinner out right there several times. So you need to know that so that you can put it in. Why? Because if we get to the end at a closing in his office and it comes out and we didn't mark that, Do you not think they're going to knock on the broker's door and say, I want that extra money, that $155? It's not coming from your seller because he didn't know about it. It's coming from us.
Right.
Okay. So, yes, it probably is opening a can of worms, but we didn't know really any other way to go at it, and so it was passed. So this is coming up, and you'll see it. I just need to tell you.
Was there ever an opportunity to tell Paducah, sorry, no?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, several times. But they did their homework, and they made their own phone calls, and we could not go against what they found. It was evidently okay to do this with, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The problem is getting to the closing and not knowing it's been deducted,
Yes.
because that is against Sherman antitrust law.
Yes, that is true.
They can't reduce your commission without your permission.
And plus,
There's where the
who
problem
controls the value of the contingencies? That's the other problem.
Yeah. We were really forced into this, and there was no way legally not to, not to do it.
Like you said, it's fine to do it. You just have to know the priority.
Right. It has to be up front. We did during the, we got through our whole thing yesterday at Regional, and for old business, we said, Paducah, do you have anything to say? And they said, we have no report at this time. I don't know if that means we're not going to pull out, or if it means we're still planning on it, and you'll be the last to know. I don't know. I will tell you this. The lady was there from Black Knight. She is the one that is our go-between with Paragon. There's going to be our contracts coming up. We have not voted to accept it or reject it. She did talk to us about it. I will tell you, should we go with them again, a few changes that are happening, and there's many. I won't tell you all of them. We'll send it to you through Twyla. Our Bing mapping, which sometimes is so bad, you'll put on it and you can't even find a road anywhere near it, and it's out in the lake. We are going to Google now, which will be a huge help in that regard. We also asked her, because we knew it was an issue, if we have a place in each county for the directions to begin. Ours here is usually at 12th and Main. Could they populate the directions once they have the address up there, because we're using Google? And she said that may be possible, and they're going to check on that. How wonderful that would be, just to hit that and it goes, there's how you get there, which would help tremendously. It would also help those in Paducah who didn't like to go left or go right or go anywhere. They will have a place start at exit 42, and we, at least if we can find exit 42, can get to the property. So that's what we're working in on that. They are also, Black Knight is also implementing HomeSnap, which is going to have some really great additions and capabilities. Brenda, do you have or Phil anything from yesterday?
No, just, what she went over was quite impressive in terms of a lot of the enhancements, especially on the mobile app and so forth. So they're really doing a lot of stuff, which is, well, according to her, is number one. They're number one in the industry still, in terms of what they provide to the market. So right. I don't foresee us changing or even looking at a change. But
all right.
I think Kathy
We are going to be offering training, 2-day training.
Yeah, 13th, 14th of March.
13th and 14th of March. It's going to be hopefully at the CFSB in Benton, and there are some really exciting things coming up. I think you'll want to be part of that.
They will reflect all the new things that they're going to be implementing. They will have probably 6 classes, maybe more, 8 classes. Each one will be hitting a different thing that you can go and take. You will have to send in your notification early. You can't just show up at the door. There's places for 100. If you want to go for one day, send other people in the office for the next day, then you can share information. That would be a great thing too. We're checking to see if it can stand for 3 of our CE hours. I cannot promise that yet. They're checking on it. Thank you for your patience.
Kathy has
I'm sorry.
2 questions before you dismiss us. First of all, the directions. Sometimes those mappings take you way out of the way or whatever, so will we be able
You have the right, you'd have the capacity to go back in and change it.
Okay. Then When should we expect to be able to use said contracts, because there's some changes that have to be
Well,
made?
that's a
And
good
I'm not
question.
saying, Linda, stay up all night and do this. I'm just,
We're going to make
we all need to start using them at the
Yes,
same time.
I agree.
as soon as we can get together, if we can get together
Okay,
next
we'll
week.
get together and redo it. Yeah, because we were ready to shoot them right after this, but we've improved. What we've improved is our good improvement.
Will these be set up as templates?
Yes.
Please, please, please.
I got a two-part question.
Okay.
Okay, the second part of that question is, will we be able to get to the footnotes to put information in the footnotes?
No.
Because
Well, whatever Twyla sent was pluggable, it's template now, she sent.
We won't have that, you'll have it on Ziploc.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful.
what was the answer?
They'll gonna have it on Ziploc. So
Zip Logic.
It's only plastic storage. Linda, one other thing, back to Paragon, we're also adding, I don't know how many, we're adding more characters to the remarks field.
Yes.
So a lot of times you run out, you gotta go back and cut and paste and so forth. So I forget what the number is, but that's gonna be.
Right. I think she said she'd let us know, but beef it up. Thank you, and thank Warren, guys.